Alrighty. Hello, 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 folks. How are we doing? Welcome, everybody. I hope you all are having an excellent weekend. Let me get my screen switched over here. Alrighty. Welcome, folks. I hope y'all are having a good weekend. Like I said, if y'all could help me out, let me know, how are my audio levels? Hey, Yotag, Sanchez, how are ya? Hi, Renitz. How is my audio? Do I sound okay? As you can probably tell, I have made some changes to the stream. Yes, volume was fine. Fun pick on Night Train. Yeah, I thought Night Train would be a great intro song for today's stream. Just the right length and very chill. So thank you to Chris P. Nugget for providing the intro audio that I used today. Um, and yeah, definitely follow Chris on Twitter. They are an excellent music producer and generously volunteered some of their tracks for me to use. So much appreciated. Thank you, Lizine. Good to see you. Thank you, Crow. Yes, Ice Fire. I'm going to give you the template. Don't worry. I'm going to give you the template. Actually, you can get it right now. I'm going to walk you all through how we're going to start today's code, what we're going to be doing today. So don't worry. We haven't done anything yet. You haven't missed anything. We're just starting out. So, what are we doing today? Today we are taking the restaurant template that we built a couple weeks ago, and we're going to modify that and make that into a full stack project. So by full stack, I mean we're going to have a server and we're going to have a MongoDB backend on this project to capture some of the reservation data. So let me get that pulled up so you can see what it'll look like when we're done. I realized I didn't get my server going first, so hold on. I'll get that running. I have the finished version on my other screen. Oh, Cormosaurus helped you with that track. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so let me go over here. Did I close that? I guess I did. All right. Um, there we go. All right, so this is the template that oh, awesome, Ray. I'm glad you were excited about it. All right, so this is the template that we worked on last time. It is a static site, which means we're not using React, we're not using really anything fancy. There is a little bit of JavaScript in switching these tabs here, but that's really it. There's not much. There's no back end to it, nothing like that. And what we did is on the template, we put a form, right? So we have a form. It allows you to enter some data, but right now, as is, this form does not hook up to anything. So it's just there for show. If you were to put anything in there, it would the data would not end up anywhere. And that's fine for a template, right? If you're just, who knows what kind of a back end a business is going to have, so you don't want to assume. Um, but if we were going to make this into an actual full stack project and make it stand on its own, so for example, let's say you had a client that didn't have any kind of a database or any kind of a back end or anything like that, and you want to help them stand this up, then you're going to need to make it into a full stack project. Um, and let's see, Drunken Garma says, oh, hi, by the way. If you were to convert an integer to hex, what would be your go-to? Are you just talking like you have an integer and you just want to convert it to a hex value? I mean, I would probably just find a converter online and use that. Oh, using SQL. Okay, okay. Let me think. I feel like I've done that, but I don't. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of. Uh, I mean, I was assuming you'd have to cast it somehow, but off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that. If anybody else does, oh, Cold War SQL stuff. Yeah, I would think it would be a cast of some kind, but I'm not 100% sure. If anybody else knows the answer, feel free to share. Hey, Raz Wonders, good to see you. And so, yeah, like I said, we're going to take this form, we're going to hook it up to a node server, and then we're going to hook that node server up to a MongoDB database. Now you might say, oh no, Mindwolf, I missed the previous stream. I didn't build this. Am I out of luck? No, you are not out of luck. I am going to give you the starter code for this template, and then we're just simply going to build on top of that. And with impeccable timing, Moobot has automatically posted in chat not only the starter code, but the finished code as well. So you can see there where Moobot posted. The starter code is just the one entitled restaurant template. So I will click on that now. We'll go there. We'll zoom in a little bit. It zoomed out so much. There we go. So restaurant template is the one we're going to be using today. And this one, also, I wanted to give Graylin0 a fantastic shout out. Graylin submitted an incredible README for this template. And so, if you were just getting this going by itself, they did a fantastic job, submitted this, and I pulled it into the README. So thank you again to Graylin0 for that. But we're going to take this as just our starter today, and we're going to turn this into a full stack project. So if you want to see what the full stack project looks like, you could look at the finished repository, which is also in that post by Moobot there. And so you can see, what that end result is going to look like. This is not going to be a terribly complicated full stack project today, mostly because I just did all these revamps and changes to my Twitch layout. As you can probably tell, I've got these fancy screens and overlays and stuff now. And also I have it's a horrible Frankenstein's monster of like alerts. And so yeah, you're gonna see some overlapping alerts. Things are not gonna work correctly. We're just gonna we're gonna see what happens. I don't even know what's gonna happen. So it's gonna be interesting what works and what doesn't. So I wanted to do a slightly easier project today to kind of so we could deal with technical issues if they came up. Loving the slide in chat messages. Yeah, I think it looks sweet. That alert all these overlays and alerts are from Nerd or Die, which is a site that does pre-built overlays and Twitch templates, and I like this one quite a bit. I modified it pretty heavily, but it is still from Nerd or Die, so credit to them. And the chat messages are being supplied by through Streamlabs as a widget. Oh, you like it? Good. Oh, yes, my channel point redemption worked. Woo! Thank you for the hydrate there, Laylo. That's one thing that works. I do need to move it, though. I can see it's overlapping the chat, but I'm just glad it worked. So, yay, one of my alerts works. Hey, Grandpa can code. MK Beast, thank you for the hydrate. Hey, Grandpa can code, welcome to the stream. You are not too late, my friend. We are just getting started. I was just explaining the starter code, and if you want to see that starter code, you can do !project in chat. And I have down here at the bottom, you can see right here at the bottom of the stream, I've got the command for that. So !project. If you want links to the starter code and links to the finished version of the product that we're working on today. Finzi, welcome. Welcome to be here. Yeah, good to have you here. Yippee, indeed. Yeah, it is fun, isn't it? All right, so as we're going today, like I say, this is a new layout for my stream. I changed a lot of things. I changed a lot of things behind the scene. So please let me know if anything doesn't seem right, if audio levels are strange, if alerts are too loud. Please do let me know so I can fix them as needed. So looks fancy. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yes. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you, first thing I'm going to show you is how to get this repo, the one we're looking at right now, get it down and get it opened up in VS Code. This may not be something that, hey Luis, this may not be something that you've done before, but fortunately with VS Code, it's very easy. Microsoft products tend to work very well together, and VS Code is a Microsoft product, and so is GitHub. So that's nice. They play very nicely together. And also, too, if you're new to the stream, we've got several new folks on here today. Do feel free to ask questions at any point. You're not going to interrupt me. you're fine. You're allowed to ask questions. There's no such thing. No, there is no such thing as a stupid question, because if you have that question, then that probably means that at least one other person in chat also has that question. So good to see, Louise. All right. So if you are in VS Code, what you can do is you can open a new window. Now I've already cloned this down, so I'm not going to do it again, but I will show you how to do it. So you would open a new window in VS Code, and what you would do is you would say clone git repository. And after that, all you need to do is paste in the URL. So you would go back to here. You would just grab that URL from your browser and you would pop it straight into this location up here. So you just paste it in. And then once you do that, it's going to say, oh, do you want to open this in a new window or do you want to open in the existing window? You would choose whatever is appropriate for you. And then you'll have the code and it's cloned down and you'll be able to work with the same code that I'm working with here on screen. So I'll give everybody a second to do that. So go ahead and clone down the restaurant template repo. So in the code that Moobot posted there in chat, it's the first one. So you want to make sure you're starting with the starter code so you can build along with us today. All right. Any questions there? Hey, Engineer Moore, good to see you. Also, too, before we get too far into this, somebody commented on one of my YouTube videos. They said, so first off, if you want or need closed captions, those are currently running. So I am running closed captions on my Twitch streams, and you would just hover over the right side of the screen and you'll see a little pop-up. You can click closed captions to turn those on, and those are auto-generated, so they're not going to be perfect, but I think they are helpful to some people that want or need them. Now, I had somebody comment on one of my YouTube videos in my archive. No worries, safety vest. I had somebody comment on one of the YouTube videos saying, you know, why aren't there captions here on YouTube? And that's because YouTube doesn't carry over these Twitch captions. Unfortunately, I wish it did. But YouTube captions are generated separately, and those are you can auto generate captions on YouTube videos, or they can be hand typed by the author of the video. So unfortunately, I just don't have the time to go through all of my videos and hand generate captions for those to type them out by hand. However, I wanted to make everybody aware of a feature in Chrome, and I assume this is probably a feature in other Chromium-based browsers such as Edge. You can turn on live captions in Chrome. And I'm sorry for the light mode here, but you can turn on live captions in Chrome by going to Settings, Accessibility, and turning on live captions. This will allow you to add captions to really any audio source within Chrome. So if captions are something that you find yourself using often or need for accessibility reasons, you can turn them on within Chrome globally for really any video audio source. Okay, so turn those on if you need them. That will allow you to have captions on really any video that you watch in Chrome. All right, and we got some questions here. Let me catch up with chat. So yeah, feel free to turn those on in Chrome globally if you need to. That should help you with some of the YouTube videos. All right, back to dark mode now. Sorry for that. Da, 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 da. Grandpa Code is asking, what are they asking? Can you show me the repo to VS Code one more time? Yes, of course, no problem at all. All right, so you've opened a new window in VS Code. This is the kind of the welcome page. And what you do is you click clone git repository like this, and then just paste in the URL. So you can see the URL up here in my bar in Chrome like this. Just paste it here. And then you would hit enter. And it will say, do you want to open this in a new window? You can choose yes or no. It doesn't really matter. And then it will open it in VS Code for you. All right. And if you want a link to my YouTube channel, do !YouTube in chat. That will give you a link. Or you can just do !commands for a full command list of all the commands that you have available to use from my bot in chat. All right. And I've already got this open, so I'm not going to do it again. This is what it'll look like once you get it open. All right, let me catch up with chat, make sure. YouTube link, yeah, so you got that. You would think that YouTube would have the best caption generation, TBH. They have so much data from both Google and video. Yeah, I actually used to be a captioner for YouTube. I would, they used to allow volunteers to generate captions for people's videos, and I would do that. I manually captioned several videos for other creators on YouTube because I felt that it was a valuable thing to do. But then YouTube stopped allowing that. So now the creator has to type the captions themselves or load the captions themselves, or they have to just be auto generated. So it's kind of disappointing that that work kind of just went to waste in the end. Mavi says, I see a CSS file. Yeah. If you missed the template last time, I mean, I can show you the finished project. I'm actually pretty proud of myself. We did a lot of CSS here. We did a lot of Bootstrap and custom CSS to make what I think is a decent looking template. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I'm no designer, but I think we did all right. All right. Anyway, I'm almost caught up with chat. Grandpa says, "Can I use the restaurant website that I made myself from your video?" Of course. Yes, of course. You absolutely can. Yeah, just you would need to be mindful of any differences in your code versus my code, right? But it shouldn't be that big of a deal because mostly what we're going to be doing today is new stuff. We're going to be adding a server and like a MongoDB connection to this. And so we're not really going to be messing with what's existing here. We're just going to mainly be, adding elements. So yeah, you should be able to use, your, what you have already, no problem. All right, now let me check. I think, yes, everything is visible. Sorry, I'm still getting used to how big my new elements are here. Need to make sure I don't have anything overlapping or not visible to you. If anything ever is on the screen and you can't see it because of the Twitch, overlay stuff like my camera or my chat box or anything like that, please let me know and I'll resize things because I don't know. I can't always see that from my perspective. All right. Moobot's being a little overzealous. It's posting the code a lot, but that's okay. All right. Any questions before we get started? Alrighty. Again, feel free to ask questions anytime. So we've cloned this down. And now what we're going to do is we are going to first do a little bit of reorganization because if we're making this into a full stack project, full stack projects generally have a slightly different structure. So in a full stack project, what you generally want to do is take all of your static um, oh, Drunko Groma says, I've been meaning to build a site using your Supabase vid. Crazy how easy it is once you explained it, right? Yeah. Go ahead. You can build it with Supabase as your backend if you want. It's not going to be that different. Um, so in a full stack project, generally your static assets, such as static HTML pages, CSS files, images, those types of things, and associated scripts that attach themselves to those static files. Those are going to be combined in a specific folder. So we take our static assets, we bundle them together, and we put them into a specific folder. Now, does anybody know what that folder is generally called? You have static assets in a full stack project. What is the name of the folder that we put those in? So I'm not just going to tell you stuff. I'm going to ask you questions too. How we roll. Yeah, we generally put them in a public folder. Yeah, there's a folder called public, and then when we set up our server, there's actually we can actually use just one command to tell our server exactly where all those assets are located because they're in a folder called public. And so that's really easy for us to do. So what we're going to do here is we're going to bundle things up just a little bit. I'm going to make a new folder at the root of my project. So notice how it's when I say at the root, I mean just inside the folder that holds everything, not not at any particular level. I'm just going to put it right at the root here, and I'm going to call it public. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my images in there. So assets are going to go in here. I'm going to say, yes, I want to move it. My index.html is going to go in there. Oh, I don't want to move it into assets. Hate it when that happens. Let me back up a little bit here. I'm going to move, okay, I'll move index first. Move. There we go. I'm going to move my styles in there. Move. And I'm going to move my script.js in there. Move. And I'm going to move my assets folder in there as well. So now really all of my existing files, everything that I previously had other than my GitHub README, is inside of my public folder because these are all static assets or static items. Hey, Fafin, good to see you. And so really we're just, everything that we built last time is going to be grouped together in this public folder. And then we're going to be building our sort of our more logical components, our server, our, get ignore, that sort of thing. Those things are going to exist outside of the public folder. Mavi says, I've been using MySQL with Java, but Supabase would be nice. Yeah, Supabase is really nice. They also liked me on Twitter a couple times, and so I'm pretty stoked about that. I'd be chuffed if they decided to sponsor me. That'd be cool. Because I do generally like their product. All right, so we've grouped everything together here. Now we're really only going to make one tweak to what we built before. And this is going to be inside of our index.html. So we put everything in the public folder. Now let's go into index.html. And inside of index.html, what is the, based on what we know about how this looks, what is the part of this HTML that's actually going to be talking with our server? What is the part of this HTML that's going to be sending data, if I may say so myself? What is the part of this that's going to be sending data? Yeah, the only part of this HTML that's actually going to be talking to our server, to our backend, it's going to be sending data to our backend, is the form, right? Yeah. So that we have our form down here, and if you're looking for it in the HTML, it's on line 221, and you can always do a Control F and look for contact. And so this is a form, and what this form allows people to do is it allows people to enter data and submit it, right? In this case, it's reservation data. So the form itself starts down here at the form tag. And you could also just do a Control F and search for form if you're looking for it. It's on line 231. And what this form does is it encloses all of the input boxes where people input data. And once again, looking at this, it's just 4 input boxes with name, people, a reservation date, and then a message. And then there's a send message button. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to hook this part of the page up to a server, and that data is going to flow through our server, and then it's going to write to a database. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to have it display a message to the submitter as to whether that information was successfully submitted. So if it was successfully submitted, we want to tell the user what happened. Like, did their message go through? How do they know, right? How do they know that that data got written? And so what we're going to have it do is we're going to have it send back an alert box and display, yes, your reservation was successfully submitted, and they click OK, and then, and then they can go back to doing whatever they were doing. And then the second, option would be, sorry, there was an error, please call, a phone number, right? So that's the goal here. And so in order to make this form be able to talk properly to our server, we are going to need to adjust it just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. And really, we're just going to be changing this first line here. So just, by default, we have some information in here, but this really isn't doing anything right now. It was just a copy and paste that I did from something else. And so we need to modify this a little bit so that it actually works. So the first thing we're going to change here is our action. And Obviously, we're not using PHP. We're not going to be using PHP for this project. So I'm going to change this to just be submit. And what does this action mean? When we say action, what am I specifying here? Does anybody know? What am I specifying here when I specify the action? Or what does this do? It's also okay to say if you don't know, it's okay to say don't know either. That's fine. Yeah, so OpenSea says on submit, are we looking for an event listener? Well, the cool thing about forms, one of my favorite things about forms is that they have certain built-in capabilities. So unlike most things where if you were building something manually, you would have to set up an event listener and be listening for clicks or listening for a hover or something like that. The cool thing about forms is that if you set up a form tags, with a submit button, like this one has, you can see it has a button with a type of submit. That form has certain built-in capabilities to where as soon as you click that button with type of submit, it's automatically going to try to send that form data to a server if one exists. Now, we're going to set up a server that's going to be listening for this. And so it's just going to automatically work. We won't have to set up an event listener. However, what this action is doing, as Icefire says, it's basically specifying what we call like a route. So what what action should be performed. We're gonna tell our server what certain actions mean. So if a server is listening and it receives a route that contains slash submit, so literally like a URL or a path that contains slash submit, then it's going to perform certain actions based on that path. And we're going to tell it what to do. When we get path submit, then take this data and write it to the database. And so really here, this is sort of just like an instruction, right? We're telling our server what action to perform by passing it an instruction. In this case, that instruction is going to be called submit. And then we're going to tell our server what submit means. In this case, it means write to the database. And our server is going to be like, oh, okay, I just got a path that contains the word submit. I'm going to write this data to the database. Okay. Yeah, it's a route. Oh, good. I'm glad that makes sense. Yeah. So now the second thing we're going to do here is I'm going to get rid of target. And instead of target, I'm going to say method. Okay. And there's different types of built-in methods that you can use. And those methods are sort of like a shorthand way of telling our server what action is going to be happening. So are we going to be submitting a request to create new data? It's basically, it encapsulates basically all the CRUD methods. There's a couple more too, but you can think of it as create, read, update, delete. We're telling the server to do generally one of those four things: create, read, update, or delete. Um, Now, there are special words for those because of course there are, right? Nothing can be, that straightforward, right? And so there are specific words for those. And create essentially equates to a word called post. Um, and let's see, I'm gonna get this wrong. Read is get, update is put, and delete is delete. Now I sometimes mix up create and update as far as post and put. Did I get that right? I'm genuinely asking because I do mix those up sometimes. So there's certain keywords that we can use as our method, which is going to tell our server basically what we're trying to do here and how that request should look from the form to the server. You can feel free to Google it, and I won't know, that you're Googling. But anyway, what we're going to be doing here is we need to specify one of those four things. So we need to specify um, that's all right. Don't worry about it. I already know what method we're going to use. So it's all good. So forms themselves are limited to only using two methods. And that's just the way they're written. I don't know why I didn't come up with the concept of forms. Forms are limited to only using two methods. And those two methods are post and get. So either you are submitting a request to retrieve information, or you're submitting a request to create information. So out of those two, which do you think we should use for this particular form? Yes, and this is speaking about this. Speaking of what methods do forms recognize, or what methods can you use with forms? That's a I agree with you. I think that would be an excellent interview question. Is what methods can you actually use with forms? What by default what methods do forms understand? And we've got, yeah, post and get. So yes, and you guys are right. We're going to be using post for this particular request because we're going to be writing new information into our database. And so I'm going to specify my method as post. You can see there it's a keyword, so VS Code knows what it is. Um, Otherwise, people could just delete their forms. They don't want that. Well, there are ways to get around it. Really, the way it's you can do anything with a form. You can do updates, you can do deletes with a form, and it's super easy to, because all you need to do is just take the request and then do whatever the heck you want on the server side. It really, you can do whatever you want with the data you're passing in from a form. Once it hits the server side, that's where all the logic is anyway. But by default, you can only use post and get with forms. So and I think maybe the reason why that is just because they know that people are going to do whatever the heck they want with this data on the server side. So, like, why would they change the base tag to accept more methods when it really doesn't matter? So, by default, all form tags have a get method, but then we can specify here a different one if we want to. All right, so I'm going to save that, and that's all we're changing here. That's it. So Grandpa Codes asked earlier, can I do this with the template that I built, or that they built while they were watching my stream, which may be different. Yes, you absolutely can, because from the stuff that we did a couple weeks ago, this is the only thing we're changing. We're just prepping our form so that it can speak intelligently to our server when we're ready, and then moving things into this public folder. So yeah, now we're done here. That's all we're doing. And so now we actually get to start making some new elements to our project here. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a new file, and I'm going to minimize my public folder here just so I don't accidentally put something in there. And at the root, like we did before, I'm going to make a new file, and this file is going to be called server.js. And this is going to be where our server lives, obviously. So this is going to be our conduit that's going to allow our static site here to talk to our database. And it's also going to allow us to run our site on an actual local host. So if you tuned in last time, how we ran our site last time was by using like Live Server, which is built into VS Code, which kind of sets up like a virtual server within VS Code, and then allows you to open a site in a browser. But we're going to have our server do that instead. And we're going to set up our server to not only display the HTML page with the CSS and all the scripts and everything, but also then pass requests into our database. And what this would allow you to do is, actually, if you wanted to turn this into an actual like website for someone, you could find a host, spin up your server there, and pretty easily just deploy this site wherever you wanted to. All right. So in our server.js, and actually too, before we go into that, we need to do something. If I want to build a server, what do I need to do? What am I going to need? Well, I guess maybe not need, but what's going to make building a server a lot easier? Yeah, Express, or just in general, we're going to need some dependencies. We're going to be installing some stuff on top of basic Node that's going to make building a server a lot easier and make things function a lot better. So we're going to be installing some dependencies here. And if I want to install dependencies, if I want to install some packages, what do I need to do in order to initialize that? NPM garbage. So what do I need to do if I want to start installing some things? Yeah, npm. Whoops, sorry. You're gonna want to open a terminal. So if you don't know how to do that, terminal, new terminal, and I like to use Bash for my terminal, but you could use whatever you normally use for this sort of thing. I use Git Bash, but everybody uses something different. So we can do npm init, and I should have done -y, but I forgot. So I'm just gonna hit enter until it brings me back to the prompt again. And I realize actually that's probably below my, no, that's not. Okay, you can still see it. Good. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna change my window size just a little bit. Bear with me. All right, there we go. So that hopefully that's a little easier to see. All right, and so now I've initialized my package manager. And so I can see I have package.json here in my file list now. And now I can actually start installing some dependencies. So as Drunk Uncle Grandma said, we're going to install Express, which is going to help us set up our server more quickly and easily. So I'm going to say npm I Express. Now, what are some other stuff that I might want to use when I'm building a full stack project like this? What's some other stuff that's going to be helpful? Mongoose, yep. And we'll talk about what these are. Don't worry. If you've not heard of Mongoose, we'll talk about what these are. Something from MongoDB. Yep. In this case, Mongoose is what we're gonna be using for MongoDB. You don't have to use Mongoose, but it certainly helps. .env, absolutely. Hey Douglas, welcome to the stream. Hey Douglas, good to see you. They say NodeMon and Cores. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and install Cores. You can use NodeMon if you would like. Yep. And let me see. I think that might be everything. Let me double check. Yeah, that's all the basic stuff that we need. So I'm gonna go ahead and install these. And also too, I'm doing all this assuming that you do already have Node installed on your machine globally. Um, Metal says Express handlebars. We're not going to be using handlebars. We won't need it. Our front end is just going to be static HTML, and the form is already set up to send data. The form is all we had to do was tweak that one line in the form to send data to our server, and we won't need handlebars or anything like that. She can ride her up with no handlebars, no handlebars. Yeah. Grandpa says, what was the step right before this one in the terminal? Yeah. So in order to initialize, you would do npm init. And also, Grandpa, I don't know, what level you're at as far as building apps, but you will need to have Node installed globally on your machine. So hopefully you've already done that at some point. You've installed Node, and after that you can build as many full stack apps as you want. So yes, you would do npm init, and then you would hit enter to get through all the prompts. You could also do npm init -y to skip those prompts, but so you would just keep hitting enter until you get back to the main um, the prompt again from Bash. Oh, you have Node. Good, excellent. I just wasn't sure how far along you were. That's awesome. I'm glad you have Node. And so, yeah, you do npm init -y or just npm init, and then you would install these items here. So I will put this in chat as well. npm I, and the I here just means install. It's just a shorthand. You could type install if you want. We have npm I or install express mongoose.env and cores. All right, npm I express mongoose.env cores. And now let's say, what if I didn't know? What if I didn't know what things I needed to install. Maybe how could I look at the finished repo? How could I look at the finished project and know exactly what I needed to install? How could I figure that out? Yeah, I could look at the finished project and I could go into the package.json file in the finished project and see that. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and install these things. I'm going to hit enter and install them. It takes just a moment. All right, that's done. Now I can go into package.json and it literally lists out all the dependencies. So if you're ever in a finished project and maybe you're trying to build something similar, or you're like, oh, how did they do that? Like, what did they, they did something really cool and fancy there. Like, I've never seen that before. I wonder if they need to install something special to make that work. You can go into their package.json file, look at their dependencies, and see what they have installed. So that's just a little tip there. However, if you're cloning down or you're using somebody else's repo that already has those things installed, you could just say npm install and it would read from this list and install them automatically for you. So, either way, it just depends on how you're building your project. All right. Yes. Okay. So we've got these things installed. Perfect. Now we can actually start building out our server. I'm going to make my terminal a little smaller here. Navi says, I always enjoy admiring the versions of the currently installed garbage. Yeah. Versions on some of these things change so quickly. Luckily, if you have downloaded a repo from someone else and you do npm install, npm is going to look through and hopefully identify if there are upgrades to some of those packages, and apply those upgrades. Sometimes that can break things, so there's ways around that. But if you just do npm install, it is going to try to upgrade, I believe, if it can. All right, so server.js. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in those things that I just installed. So in order for our server to know that those things are there and make use of them, we need to do what we call requiring them. So this is really just we're going to declare some variables, and those variables are going to contain all of the information about the things we just installed. So we can use methods and other things that are based on the packages we just installed. So I can say const express, and we'll say require express. And sometimes VS Code will help you autocomplete these things a little bit. Const mongoose, say require mongoose, and const cores will require cores. And the last one for .env, it's just built different, so you got to do it a little differently. We'll say require .env, and we'll talk about what each of these are for as we use them. Don't worry. .config. That one just looks a little different. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say const app equals express. And then what we've done there is we've essentially said we've pulled in express, and then now we have this shorthand variable that's going to allow us to use any method associated with express. And basically, whenever we see something like app dot whatever, that's going to be an express method. It's going to basically help us build faster servers more easily. I know some of you folks here in the stream have built servers without express, and it's no bueno. It's not fun. So express really is an express way to build a server. All right. I think now the next thing we'll do is let's go ahead and set up our middleware next. So I know some of this setup stuff is kind of tedious, but it is really necessary for basically the basic functionality of our server. And so we'll set up our middleware here, and we'll talk about what each piece of middleware is doing. And then we'll set up our Mongoose connection, and we will get our connection details from MongoDB, and then it'll probably be about time for our first break. Alrighty. So first off, let's go ahead and set up our middleware. Now, what does middleware do? What does middleware do? I was like asking this question because some people know what middleware does, some people don't. Some people are like, I've heard the term, but what exactly is it? What is it for? I'll give an example of some middleware. So app.use. Let's do that. Here's an example. Here's a good example of middleware. App.use cores. So you'll find that most middleware starts with app.use. So that shows that it's an express method. Express is doing something here. App.use and then a thing. Engineer says it does this stuff in the middle. And that's actually technically correct. Yeah. What middleware does is just what it says. Middleware is essentially like, so the US Post Office, if you take a letter, take a letter and you put it in the mail, you probably wrote the address on the outside of that letter in pen, right? You probably, I mean, yeah, you can print labels and stuff, but 99% of the time, if you're just mailing a card to your grandma, you're just going to write the address on the outside of the envelope uh, in pen by hand. Now, do you have the best handwriting in the world? I know I don't. Yeah, my handwriting is crap because I never handwrite anything anymore. So when I do, I know that it's pretty terrible. And so that letter goes in the mail. The postman or post person, mail person, I don't know, delivers it to the post office. And then the post office tries to read that address to see where that mail should go. Now, what it essentially has to do, what the post office essentially has to do, is it has to translate that address into something that fits into the post office system, right? It has to translate that address into something valid because I don't know, maybe you got the zip code wrong, maybe you spelled the street name wrong, maybe you wrote everything in cursive and it's just garbage. And so the post office has to do some translation, has to do some changes in there, and then when it's done, they print a code on the envelope. It tells where the letter should go, and the letter gets to its destination. And so that's basically what middleware does: is it takes an incoming request and it does something to it. It transforms it in some way so that the message can get successfully to its destination in the format that the recipient expects. So, server, another API, whatever. That middleware is going to do some translation, do some modifications to make that message readable, to make that, in this case, it's going to be form data, to make that form data readable at its destination. Mine is literal chicken scratch. Drunk Uncle Grandma says, all my handwritten stuff looks like a doctor's signature. Yeah, I learned how to write cursive in third grade and I never looked back. So yeah, I just basically I either write everything in cursive or I write third grade level print. So yeah, it's not good. And so yeah, that's what middleware is for. It just does some translation. It does some modifications to make things readable at the destination, essentially. So we're going to be adding several bits of middleware here. We're going to say app.use, um, express dot URL encoded, and then extended false. Okay, so this first one here, what this does is it's essentially allowing us to take that form data and, like I said before, translate the data that's coming in raw from the form, translate it into a readable format. If you forget this, you're gonna probably get empty form data trying to write to your database. And I know because I've done it before. If you forget this, yeah, you're probably not gonna get anything that's gonna write successfully to your database. And the next one is similar as well, app.use express.json. And then the third one is app.use CORS, which we saw before. Does anybody remember what CORS stands for? What does CORS stand for? Mm-hmm. Cross origin something. Cross origin something something. Yeah, what it stands for is cross origin site requests. And I don't know why it's not causer because that's what it would actually be, but I think CORS is maybe I know it is cross origin site requests, um, but cross origin request sites makes no sense. So cross origin really smooth. Yeah, baby. um, and so what CORS does, what this middleware does, I should say, is it gets around a what's essentially a security feature in Chrome. And so, or in most modern browsers, because browsers want to protect you from malicious requests that might be coming from bad actors, people trying to intercept, site requests, that type of thing. And so, if you don't have this, depending on how your server is set up, you may or may not get all your requests being blocked by your browser, saying like, nope, this is a security risk. We can't identify where these requests are coming from. You got some weird suspicious activity going on here. Now, as soon as you enable CORS in your server, you're essentially telling Chrome or whatever browser you're using, hey, these requests are valid. I'm bypassing this security feature. These are good, valid requests. And so, you may not always get this error if you don't use CORS, but it's in general, if you have it, then you can bypass that problem. They were like close enough in the abbreviation. Yeah, maybe someone was drinking Coors and dropped the O. Y'all are funny. All right. Um, so next piece of here, actually, our last piece of middleware is going to be app.use. This one's very important. Express dot static public. Are we set? As Fire says, are we setting a port? Yes, we will absolutely get there. Never fear. But the middleware, you have to do the middleware first. So if you're setting up a server on your own, and like the elements that you need, remember that your middleware, since it's in the middle, it has to come before you set up your port in your server. The actual the server that you're going to be listening on. So just don't forget that when you're setting up your own stuff. So what does this do? App.use express static public, and that static keyword hopefully rings a bell from a little earlier in the stream, and maybe gives you a clue as to what this piece of middleware is supposed to do. Candypan says, curious if you make a design document before you start coding. I know some people do. And I think it depends on like how complicated the project is. I'm kind of a chaotic person, so I do not. I generally start, but I generally start from like a foundational perspective. So I'll build the elements that I know I'm going to need. Like if I'm building a full stack project, I'm normally going to build the back end first. I'm normally going to build my server, that kind of thing. Get the basic elements such as this stuff set up first, just regardless of what else I'm doing. And then I just I iterate from there. I start slowly adding features, from there. I don't generally start with, I'll have a general like end result in mind, but I don't build out like a full document for that. Renit says serves the public folder, and Icefire says lets you access everything in the public folder, tells the server where the static folders are for shared files. For the static file. Yes, all of those answers are correct. Yep. Essentially, what this is doing is we're just pointing our server to say, hey, all the static files are right here in this folder called public. And that just tells Express, yep, all that stuff is there. Serve that folder for all the static files. Anything you need is going to be in our public folder. And so that's where we have everything. So that makes it very convenient. Just by default, that's where that stuff is. No worries, Candy Pants. Yeah, and everybody has a different project process for building a project. Um, some folks do start out with really detailed, Figma models and that kind of thing. So my day job is I'm a back-end developer. I'm a SQL developer by day. And so I start out with the part I'm more comfortable with, which is, more the raw code, the back end type stuff. Design is usually an afterthought for me, as many folks who are regular viewers know. Design is not my generally my first thought, but not saying it's not important. It's just not how my process generally works. Uh, Chris says, "What is middleware?" Yeah, so we kind of talked about that. It really is. It's and there's no harm in asking the question either. That's a perfectly valid question. Um, Middleware is what happens in the middle. It takes requests. So, for example, let's say some form data that we just clicked submit. A user clicks submit on a form, that, and that data gets passed up to our server and then eventually written to a database. Now, in the middle, in order to make that data readable at its destination, there's going to need to be generally some sorts of transformations being done. We have to, maybe take form data and bundle it up into an object so it can be read by our server and written to the database. Or maybe we need to bypass certain security features in the browser that are going to try to block requests like this because they might be suspicious. And so, this bypasses those. And this middleware kind of works in the opposite direction, right? Our server gets a request to show the homepage. In this case, just a user visits the website, right? A user visits the website. They pass in the slash. That slash goes up to the server to say give the homepage, and our server needs to know where that homepage lives. And in this case, it lives in the public folder. So yeah, middleware it helps do translation of messages in both directions to ensure that the right data is read at the destination. Mommy says for hobby projects, I generally wing it. I also don't upload them to GitHub and end up never finding them again. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, if you're doing a professional project for, say, a client, or if you're doing a professional project for an employer, I would say that documenting or putting together a design document of some kind is going to be helpful for you. You should do that. If you're working for a client or for someone else, you should put together a design document, because that means you can share that with the client and have them approve that first, which you absolutely should do. And before putting in all that work and effort. So yeah, it just depends on what the purpose of your project is. All right, so middleware, we're done with that. And the last thing I want to mention here is that you might have noticed in the repo, so in the GitHub repo, I did have one more thing in my variables up here, except I commented it out. And I did that on purpose. I put it in there and then I commented it out on purpose, because you might still see this in some projects if they're a little older. And I'm going to just drop it in here so you can see what it is. This last thing, body parser. And I just wanted to put that in there just to show you. You might sometimes still see body parser on older projects. And body parser is literally what this used to be. So these two things here, these things that help us package and translate form data into a readable format by our server and then by the database. That used to be called body parser. And so, but that used to be a separate thing you had to install. And now you don't have to anymore because it's built into Express. They knew everybody was using it, so they rolled it into Express. So that's where it lives now. But you might still see that sometimes, and so that's why I put it in here so you could say, "Oh yeah, I've seen that before," but we don't need it anymore. Okay. Yeah. So just so you recognize those words and know what they are. It's been replaced by this. Doubtful says, is it a good idea to save all the requires inside a single object named packages? Will it cause an issue? Packages will it cause an issue, so it's best to keep each as separate variables. I want to stick them in an object so it's collapsible, but not sure if it's a good idea. I've never seen that done before. I'm curious, has anybody else ever seen that, like all those requires stored together in an object? I don't know that I've actually ever seen that done, so I can't really speak to any potential pitfalls. I've literally always seen them broken out separately, like we've done here. I'm curious, has anybody ever encountered that before, where they've just been kind of bundled together? I think the downside of that would be that you would have to do everything as like a object reference, which I think would kind of be almost harder than just having them as separate variables, because each of these, this is not just one thing. What you're pulling in here is essentially multiple methods. So we're going to see where, we'll say, for example, like right here, express dot this or express dot that is us calling on these methods inside of express. And so if you have them in an object, you would have to do like object dot express dot whatever for every single reference. For me anyway, I think that would outweigh the benefits of having it be, collapsible or expandable. Because you're literally making yourself have to do more typing anytime you want to reference one of those. So yeah, I don't know that the benefits outweigh the hardships with that. Interesting suggestion though. I don't know. Okay, so middleware there. Yeah, Omi says never seen it done anywhere like that. Yeah, I personally wouldn't. Just for the reasons I said before, and by that I mean you would have to do something like, if you put all these inside of an object, you'd have to do something like then object, whatever your object name is, object dot express dot URL encoded for every single one. So yeah. No, it's just it. I mean, yeah, like I say, interesting suggestion. All right, it is 4 o'clock, so well, my time. And what we'd like to do at the top of each hour is we like to take a 5-minute break. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we come back. We'll talk through getting set up with MongoDB, getting your connection string set up, getting your environment variable set up, and actually creating your connection to MongoDB, and then creating our server and our port for our server, um, and getting cooking with that. All right, so like I say, 5-minute break. Go, get up if you're able, get a drink of water, whatever you need to do, and then come on back and we'll keep on working with this. In the meantime, feel free to ask questions during the break. I will see them in chat, and I'll address them when we get back. Oh, thank you for the follow, Ahmed. I'm sorry that the follow notification went off the screen. I'll fix that. Like I said, my alerts are going to be a hot mess for a little bit, because it's a Frankenstein's monster. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for the sub, Wex. Wow. And I had 2 alerts play simultaneously. So you got double alerts for your sub. Thank you so much. And also Wex there used their Prime sub, which didn't cost them anything. And so on my channel, I always do recommend using Prime subs. I'm never going to ask anybody for subs, but if you do want to sub, please use your Prime sub so it doesn't cost you anything. That's what I appreciate the most. Ahmed says, what are you working on? Well, today we are taking a template that we built in a previous stream, and we are making it full stack. So we're taking essentially this form front end for a restaurant website, and we are turning it into, we're building a server, and we are building a MongoDB backend on the back of it to store the data that is being passed into the form. If you want to see what that's going to look like, you can do !project in chat. So !project, and look at the finished code, and you'll see kind of what we're building today. All right, break time. I will see you all back here in 5 minutes. Feel free to enjoy the jams. Oh yeah, and Ahmed, if you want to code along with us, you can. You can just grab the starter code and clone it down, and there will be a little catch up there, but you should just be able to mimic the match your starter code and create your server.js file and catch up from there. All right, see you back here in 5. Get up and stretch, and see you soon. All right, just butting in over the sick beats here for a second to let you know we got about a minute left in the break, so go ahead and come on back when you're ready. All right, we're back. Iced Fire. I'm glad you like the music. I like it too. Once again, that is courtesy of the tremendous Crispy Nugget, um, who has been working on some fantastic tunes for the last couple of years, and generously let me use a couple of tracks for my stream here. Um, Limo says, "Does it zoom in now?" It does. Yes, that's a new transition that I added. Yeah. Yeah, feel free to please do follow Crispy Nugget on Twitter. Show them some support for their work. They do good. They do good stuff. All right. So prior to the break, we had just finished kind of putting together our middleware. Get that pulled back up. And so the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to set up our connection to the database, because in this case, really what our server, the main thing our server is doing for us is it's allowing our HTML page to talk to our database, right? We're going to have a MongoDB database. It's going to allow our HTML template, which really has no logic or brains of its own, to speak to our MongoDB Atlas database, which is in a completely different location. It lives in the cloud, and it's going to facilitate that connection. Yes, and Chris is also dropping lots more official 100 Devs music very soon as well. Looking forward to that. Yes. All right. So database connection. Um, I'm assuming here that most folks have a MongoDB Atlas account set up already. MongoDB Atlas is a type of database. It's a type of non-relational database. However, if you have a database client that you prefer and you are already familiar with, such as maybe Supabase or something else that you would prefer to use, or even a local instance of MongoDB, you are welcome to use that instead. However, today on stream, we're going to be using MongoDB Atlas. So probably the most important thing that I'm going to need is I'm going to need my MongoDB connection string. So what the connection string does is it basically allows you to log in and access data inside of your MongoDB database via an application. So rather than you typing in a username and password every single time somebody wants to write to your database, you instead pass those credentials as a string within your application. So let's go and get that. So I am already logged into my MongoDB database. Oh, and by the way, when we're done, when we're actually writing data to the database, it's going to look something like this. I know it's really small, so I'll zoom in for you. It's going to look something like this. It's just going to be. Grandpa says, "I don't have MongoDB. How do I upload it?" Okay, I have a video on my YouTube channel. It's kind of an involved process to get your MongoDB account set up and use it for the first time. I have a specific video on my YouTube channel that covers that. I would highly suggest going and watching that video, getting your account set up, and uh, I thought it was maybe in. I can't remember if it's in that Node.js video where we also set up Node. Is that one of the CRUD VODs? Yes, yes. And I don't remember which one specifically. Um, which one specifically where we actually go and set up MongoDB, but it's pretty. I think it's fairly close to where you're at. So if you just installed Node fairly recently, it should be one of the ones that's like shortly after that in chronological order, where we walk through we go step by step through the MongoDB setup process, and get that going. Yes, you will need that. You will need some kind of a database client in order to upload this data. You're welcome to continue to watch here and observe and see what we're doing, because it is pretty standard. But yeah, you will need an account. An account. You'll need a cluster, all that sort of thing. And I can try and find that specific video, after I'm done streaming here today, or but by the time I'm done streaming, you'll probably have found it. All right. So if you want to find your connection credentials, you would go to. Um, no, you're perfectly fine, Grandpa. I appreciate you joining us. And no, you did not hold shut up chat at all. And like I say, if one person has a question, probably other people have a question as well. They're just not brave enough to ask it, or they're not able to ask it. Yeah, and Mavi makes an important distinction there. When you do set up your account with MongoDB, uh, you'll want to make a free account and set up a free cluster. You do not have to pay for any of this. And actually, Grandpa, if you're still here, it should be like you can just go to like mongodb.com. And you go to mongodb.com, set up an Atlas account, and you will set up a free cluster, set up free everything. That's all you'll need. I have all my projects in a big free cluster together. So okay, yep, still here. All right, yeah. So just make sure that whatever you do, it's free. I think a good one maybe to watch would be for you, Grandpa. It would be the Star Trek API, where we take an existing uh, we take an existing project that was like basically front end and server only, and um, we move it to a MongoDB database. That might be a good one. Just off the top of my head, I think there's plenty more where we go through the process in some detail. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, I just do everything in one. Like, man, I can't manage multiple clusters. Oh, perfect. So you're doing that one already. Yeah, that one's a two-parter. So the Star Trek API one, that's a two-parter. I believe in the first one we just build a front end. We build a front end with like kind of a server, but it's like a manual, like everything's in a big old object, like all the data's in a big array, and we just pass it into the front end that way. And then I think in a bit later, I don't know if it's the next one, but it's fairly close by. We then take that and we move it to an actual MongoDB database instead. And that'll be the one that'll be helpful for you and hopefully getting fully set up there. Um, but no, I appreciate you jumping on. Grandpa can code. Yeah, absolutely. And Grandpa can code. That's right. Anybody can code. All right, so this is what it's going to look like when we're done. But as far as getting connection to your database, you can essentially just go back to your cluster. So okay, so I guess I have two, but I only use this one. So you can click on database and you'll go to this database deployment screens, and you'll click connect. And when you do, you'll go ahead and just say, I want to, and you'll go to this one here. I want to access my data through, well, I guess, no, it's actually here. Sorry. Connect to your application. We'll go to drivers. And what you'll copy is this string right here. Okay. So leave that pulled up on your screen for now. Get to this point, leave it pulled up. Once again, we went to the database option here and we clicked connect and we said connect through an application, and that brought us to this screen right here. So for now, we'll leave this pulled up. And Icefire asks, okay, I have that in a text file. Creds don't change, do they? No, and not unless you change them. Waiting for it to, yes, if you haven't used MongoDB in a while, your cluster might be paused because they want to save money on server space and all that stuff. So you might need to reinitialize your cluster if you haven't used it in a while. Now, yes, but if you have your credentials inside of a text file and you haven't changed them, then you can use those. I'm waiting for my cluster to come back online. I see you out there. I see it all out there, not building any full stack apps, uh, or using potentially using other databases. Yes, that happens often. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna leave this pulled up, and I'm gonna go back to my server.js file because we need a place to put those credentials. You got me. Yeah, so that's why I kind of did it in that order. I thought that some folks, might need some time to spin up, if you haven't built anything in a while. So yeah, you can leave your cluster sort of reconfiguring itself in the background. We're going to go back to our VS Code window here. You get an error when you try to resume it. Oh no. Well, I mean, you could always create a new cluster if you need to. If it's giving you an error, who knows why. So we're going to head back to our VS Code window here, and I'm going to need a place to put these credentials, right? This connection string. Going to need a place to put it, and I can just put it right here in my server. Like, there's nothing stopping me from doing that. It will work if I do that. But why shouldn't I do that? Why shouldn't I just go like, I would just say something like mongoose.connect and then my connection string, and it would work. Why don't I do that? Forgot to get more water during the break. Jeez. Yeah, security, right? Because you don't want to share your info on GitHub. That's one of the reasons, certainly. Because it has your yeah, there's lots of reasons, right? Probably the most obvious reason, and probably the most common reason, the common mistake that people make is they put this information, their connection string in, that contains their database password and their database username and everything about their database in a public file, which they then push up to GitHub in a public repo. And once that happens, everybody has their credentials, which is obviously not something that you want to have. And so, what we can do instead, what we should do instead, and another reason too, is just you don't want to expose that type of thing ever publicly unencoded on a server. And so, what we can do instead is we can put them in what's called an environment variable. And Mobby says, I've seen a lot of those on GitHub. Yeah, I've done it myself. I'm guilty of that myself. Is of accidentally pushing my database credentials, and you got to change your password, and you got all this stuff going on. And so, what we do instead, and what the best practice and the common practice is to use what's called environment variables. And so, you may recall that we installed something earlier called .env, and I always read it as .env. But what this is it allows us to create environment variables to store our secrets, to store our secret credentials, our secret files, and essentially allows us to use those variables anywhere inside of our app. And so if we were connecting to, say, something like Cloudinary or multiple services, multiple outside services that required a login, we could store all of those as environment variables and then reference them anywhere in the app, and nobody gets to see them. So how we do that is we simply create another file here called .env, just like that. No name, just .env. And we put it at the root here along with our server and all that sort of thing. We create a file called .env, and that's where we can define these environment variables and store anything that we don't want hanging out there in the open. All right, so I'm going to go and I'm going to get my connection string, and I'm going to show you how to not only define it here in the environment variable file that we just created, .env file, but then also how your string should look. And please keep in mind, I'm showing you this string on purpose. Axel Jebel says, hi, do you have knowledge of SQL Server? I do, yes, I'm actually a SQL developer. And yeah, but we're using MongoDB today for this particular project. However, if you are interested in like SQL solutions, I've done a couple of past streams on Supabase, which is a SQL solution. So I'm just as a preface here, before I paste in my credentials here on the screen, I'm going to show you how to define something as an environment variable, and then I'm going to show you how to customize your connection string so it can work properly with this project and work properly in general. I'm showing you this connection string on purpose, but please be respectful of that I'm showing you this string, and I always change my passwords immediately after the stream. So just please don't touch my stuff. That's all I ask. Please don't touch my stuff. I'm showing you this for educational purposes. I know, I trust you all. I do. I just like to preface that. Hey, Mattel, good to see you. Axel says, "Mine, if I need to improve my knowledge of SQL Server." Well, there's tons of resources out there. It is a Microsoft project or product. So Microsoft has excellent documentation if you're looking for specific knowledge on SQL Server itself. Um, Icefire says, "Do we already make the restaurant reservations DB?" That's what we're gonna do. That's what we're gonna do. This is gonna help us do that. What we're gonna do, what we're doing right now, this step here, this is gonna help us with that, and I'll tell you how. So first thing I do is I define the name of my environment variable. So this is where I'm going to store my connection string. I'm calling that variable MongoDB underscore URI. And it's in all caps because it's a constant. It doesn't change. So generally, if we have a constant, we want to put it in all caps. And I don't have to say let or const or anything like that. This is just how environment variables work. We define them like this. And from there, I'm going to paste that connection string that I found in here. So just a copy and paste of the connection string that I found inside of my deployment we looked at before. I'm going to drop that in here, and you'll notice it has my username, but the one thing it doesn't have is my password. So you'll need to get your password from wherever you have it stored, and you will need to paste that password in this space with the carets. So you copy this, remove the password thing with the carets, and oops, there we go. And paste your password in there instead. So between the colon and before the @ sign, that's where you put your password. And so then, just some standard stuff. And then you'll notice that there is a slash and a question mark. In your connection string, there's going to be a slash and a question mark. And there's nothing in there by default. That's empty. And you could leave it empty if you wanted. But if you want to specify a name for the database where you're going to be writing your data, and you should, that's where you need to put that name. So I've called mine restaurant reservations. It's between the slash and the question mark in my connection string. You can call it whatever you want. Does anybody know what happens if you don't? What happens if I just did this? If I just left the slash and the question mark as is, what would happen? It would work. I will tell you this, it will work. But what would be written to my database? Or what would be written to my cluster, sorry. Where would it put that, all the information we're sending it? I think many of you have probably done this before by accident. I know I have. You forget to specify the name of your database. Renate says you get a random name? No. Good guess, though. To the default database. Yes, there is a default database. And as Mavi says, that default database is called test. So if you just do this, you put in your username, you put in your password, you don't specify a database name, it's going to write it to a database called test, which really sucks when you log in later and you're trying to find the data from your application and you're like, where is it? What did I do? Where did it put all this information? It's just going to write it to a database called test, which is not what you want. So you want to give it a name that's going to be specific. I've called mine restaurant reservations. And so just remember to put that in there. So to answer Icefire's question, did we already make the restaurant reservations database? This is what we're doing right now. Now, you could go into MongoDB manually, like logging in to the web client like we did, and you could go in and you could manually, type in the name of the database, but you don't have to. As long as you specify it in this string, as soon as you connect, MongoDB will create it automatically for you. So I used to do that. In some of my earlier videos, I would go in and I would create the database first, and then I would specify the same name right here in my connection string because I thought you had to do that. But you actually don't. If you just log in, you have it in your connection string, it will create it for you as soon as you connect for the first time. Okay? All right, we'll save this. Now that I've done this, now that I've saved this environment variable, I can use it anywhere in my app, or anywhere in my server, I should say. So we've done that. And because I have this require statement here, and I installed .env, um, I installed I installed .env. Now I can reference that environment variable here in my server, so I'm not exposing my connection information. Mattel says, is the environment variable fixed? Like, can you make different ones? No, you absolutely can. You absolutely can make as many environment variables as you want. And you'll see that in some projects that we've done here on stream. For example, like I mentioned before, if you're connecting to, say, both MongoDB and Cloudinary, so two different storage solutions, so MongoDB for data and Cloudinary for images and media. Um, they're both going to have their own set of credentials, right? And you don't want to expose those credentials publicly. So you would just have two environment variables. And we've done that for other things as well, especially when you get into like authentication, because you're going to need some kind of credentials to access like authentication services. And so those are often stored in there as well. So you can define as many as you want, just give them different names, and just list them out, like, and then another one down here, and then another one down here. You can have as many as you want. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. All right, now let's go ahead and set up our connection. Now that we've defined our got our connection string and set up our variables, we'll set up our connection. So in order to set up this connection, we are going to use one of our other dependencies that we've installed. We're going to use this one called Mongoose. And I mentioned earlier that this is going to help us work with MongoDB. And that's what Mongoose is. It's a helper. It's a just like Express is for Node, Mongoose is a tool that makes MongoDB easier to use. So yes, you can have a multitude of environment variables that are each for different databases. Absolutely, that's correct. And so Mongoose essentially is to MongoDB like Express is to Node. It makes it easier to use. It gives you some more functionality, some additional methods, that type of thing. And so here we're just going to say connect to MongoDB. And we're going to say mongoose.connect. And now I want to reference that connection string. And so you might think, oh, I could just say MongoDB URI and reference that variable just like I would a regular variable. Oh, and I'll talk through password reset if you need to do that in just a second as well. Yeah, I'll tell you where that is in just a sec. So you might think, oh, I can just reference my variable like this. That's what I called it, right? But environment variables do have to be referenced in a specific way. And so we just need to add a little prefix to this. We just need to say process.env and then the variable name. And so this is only for environment variables. This is how we reference them. Process.env and then MongoDB underscore URI, which is what we called our variable. Okay. And that's all we need. That's going to connect us to MongoDB. That's all we need to do. Nothing special after that. You might see there are other things that you can specify in this connection request. You might see older versions specifying certain parameters, true or false, that kind of thing. Really, with newer versions, this is all you need to do. So, but there's other things you can configure with this. All right, so let's look at password resets. Some of you may, have looked at your connection string and gone, "Oh crud, I don't know what my password is," which happens a lot. So I'll show you where to find that. So if you need a password reset, well, I'm going to close this window that I had open, and I'm going to go to database access, and I'm going to go to edit. So find your username, whatever that is. Go here. We edit that. And I'm going to say, so I've got my username here. I'm going to say edit password. And I'm actually going to do this just because I did expose my credentials. I'm just going to change my password real quick and update that because I have to do it anyway. So I always do it after I show this on stream. So I'm going to say auto generate secure password, and I would recommend that you do this too. If you need to change your password, just have it auto generate a secure one for you. Auto generate secure password. It generates one for me. You can click show. I wouldn't just click copy. It'll copy it to your clipboard. And then the most important step, the thing that people always forget, and I've forgotten too, is say update user. This is the most important part. And they have the option, they have it all the way down here at the bottom. So you're bound to forget it. But just say update user. And it says we're deploying it. It takes like 1 minute to actually change the password. Okay. So now the old password will no longer work. I'm going to change this, the new one, and save it. All right. And now we can see that that little progress thing message is gone. And so the password has been changed. All right. I hope that was helpful for anybody that did need to change their password. All right. I've changed mine. So now we have our connection set up here. And I'm going to do so whenever we connect to our database or are trying to talk to our database, it's very helpful for us as we're doing our development work and just in general for us to know that that connection is actually successful. So there's various different ways you can do that, but basically we just want an indication in like the console. By the console, I mean the terminal down here. We want to have some kind of a message that tells us, as soon as we fire all this app up, we want to say, hey, the database is connected. I was authenticated. Um, we can write data successfully without it failing. And so there's several different ways you can do that. Generally, what you'll see are, you'll often see try catch blocks used to say, try to do a connection, and then if it fails, catch the error and write it to the console. Recently, what I've seen is actually something really interesting, and I had to do some research to figure out what is this? What is this doing? Because it seems so slick. And so I want to show you guys. But again, there's nothing wrong with using traditional try catch blocks, async await, all that kind of thing. Um, Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just want to show you a slightly different method that I thought was cool. So I'm going to say const db equals mongoose dot connection. So what this is going to do is it's going to essentially read the results of this. So we said connect, and then it's going to get whatever happened there, whether maybe it was a failure, maybe it was a success. We don't know. It's just going to say, all right, I'm going to get information about this connection, and I'm going to read that information. I'm going to say db.on error console.error.bind, not Bing, bind console connection error. And then what this is going to do is it's going to write it's going to say connection error, and then it's going to write the error to the console after that. And then another line, if the connection is successful, db.once open console log connected to MongoDB. Axel Jabo says, Mindwolf, do you have any SQL Server course from scratch? I have courses on Postgres. So Axel, are you trying to learn SQL? Like just see, not necessarily SQL Server, but just SQL? I'm just trying to see what you're getting at. Are you trying to learn like the program SQL Server and like how to use SQL Server specifically, or just SQL in general? Bada boom, bada bing. Yeah. All right. So what's happening here? We're reading the connection information, and then we're saying here, if there's an error, write that error to the console. Otherwise, once the connection is open, then console log connected to MongoDB. And I thought this was a really slick way of doing it rather than having to embed stuff in try catch blocks, doing async await, that kind of thing. What this is doing is it's using, I didn't know what I'd never seen on and once before. And I actually had to look it up because I was looking everywhere in the Mongoose documentation to be like, what the frick is on and once? And I was looking everywhere in the Mongoose documentation. I couldn't find it. I had to go to Stack Overflow. And when I did, I realized that this is not a Mongoose method. This is an Express method. So this is using Express These are things that are built into Express to do certain actions. Oh, you know MySQL. I have to learn SQL Server. I don't have any videos specifically on SQL Server. For the videos that I do here, I mostly focus on Postgres and Postgres related products, just because it's open source. For my day job, I use Oracle SQL. I don't really work in SQL Server specifically. I used to, but not anymore. So I haven't done any content on that. But yeah, so I didn't find these anywhere in the Mongoose documentation, and finally I went to Stack Overflow. That's where you always end up anyway, right? And uh, and I actually found the documentation for it. So I'm going to put it here as a comment. And I mean, we're not going to get into it, super quick, but um, it's really just this. This is also in the GitHub repo if you want to check out that link and see what it is. But yeah, it's actually, sorry, it's not Express. It's built into Node. It's built into Node itself, um, and it's a type of an event listener. Essentially, it just says, hey, if there's an error, if an error is encountered, then you can do stuff with that error. And then here, this one says basically wait. So it's kind of like an async await. Um, it waits for something to happen. So in this case, we want to wait for that connection to be open, and then we do a console log. So I thought this was pretty cool. Yeah, and Mattel says if you know MySQL, then you're not necessarily at zero for MS SQL. Yeah, exactly. So for you, Axel, if you know one flavor of SQL, so if you know MySQL, then you're gonna have a pretty good starting knowledge for SQL Server. I've worked in now I've worked throughout my career. I've worked in three different flavors of SQL. I started out in SQL Server, and then I moved to Oracle SQL, and then I moved to Postgres, and for streaming. And I have not had any trouble just picking up the next version as I get to it. So I think you'll be all right. All right. So I just thought that was neat. But yeah, you can feel free to connect to MongoDB the way we've previously done it. I just wanted to show you all something kind of new and interesting. I think it's cleaner than using try catches. I like that on and once. That's pretty good. Yeah, I think it's pretty self-explanatory too. Like you can read this and you can see exactly what it's doing. So you don't have to use async await. You can just do this, um, or try catch or whatever. Stack Overflow. Yeah. Stack Overflow is the best place to be belittled and talked down to, but then still get an answer in the end. So it's a minefield. Yep. I never post anything there. I always just go looking for answers. All right. Now, next thing we're going to do is, so since we have our connection kind of configured here, um, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the ability for our server to actually do anything. And Axel says there are many differences in the syntax between MySQL and SQL Server. Yeah, but so I've done this translation, right? I've done work in multiple flavors of SQL. I can tell you there's a lot that's the same. Yes, there's differences, but I'm 100% sure you're going to be okay. You may not have to start from zero the way you think, but I would look at Microsoft's documentation, because Microsoft documentation is very good and very thorough. So check out documentation from Microsoft if you want to learn about um, SQL Server specific methods. Yeah, just check out Microsoft documentation. That's what I would recommend, definitely. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to get our server cooking, actually just up and running in the first place, right? We want to give our server a place to run, give our server a place to listen for requests, and so before we can do anything with it, we need to actually get it up and running. So in order to do that, what do I need? What should be the next thing that I should build if I want to actually get my server up and running? I think Icefire mentioned it previously. What should I do next? Yep. So the DB is this. Remember, the DB is what we set up inside of our environment variable, right? That was in our connection string. Yep. Axel Jabal says tables. We're actually using MongoDB. We're using MongoDB today, which it doesn't use tables. MongoDB uses documents. Although that's a good guess. If we were using a regular, like a relational database, we would need tables. Yep. Icefire says route. Mattel says documents. Okay, forget database for a sec. I'm talking server. I'm talking server. We've done connect. We've done this here. So we're good with the database. No more database for now. But I'm talking just server. Just server. If I want to this server.js, this that I'm working in right here, right now, what do I need to do to get it running? Yeah, okay, so yes, we're gonna need a port. Absolutely. All right, so let's do this. We'll go step by step here. So first I'll define a port. That's exactly right. Port. I'm gonna capitalize it. I'm gonna say, I don't remember what I have running. I'm gonna say I'll say 4,000. Your port can be whatever you want. I already have something running, so. Grandpa says, don't forget what it is. I'm so glad this was helpful for you, Grandpa Kick and Code. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope to see you back here again. Yeah, catch up on the VODs. Check out my archive. We do lots of fun, introductory projects to databases. And I hope you get a lot out of those. It was great having you here today, Grandpa Can Code. Yeah, so I've set up my port. Okay, now what's next? I have a port. Is my server going to work? What do I need now? Y'all are going to be kicking yourselves when I say it. Yeah, don't listen. Exactly. A boat. Yeah, we just need app.listen, right? App.listen is actually what's going to tell our server to start listening for traffic and actually make it do something, right? It's going to be listening for traffic on that port that we specified. And that's going to allow it to actually start working with requests, listening for messages, listening for data to submit, listening for requests such as display the homepage, that kind of thing. We need app.listen to make our server put its ears on and actually start working, doing work. We need our server to actually do some work, right? Yeah. So we're gonna have it be listening, app.listen, on whatever port, goodness gracious, port we specified. And once it gets a request through that port, or sorry, once it connects to that port, we want to say console log, and we'll just say something like server connected on, and then, whatever the port is. And you'll notice that this looks very similar to this once method that we used up here, right? Looks very similar to this once method, and it has a very similar structure. Essentially, both of these methods are doing something similar. They're waiting for something to happen. They're waiting for something to happen. And then once that thing happens, they return something else. So in both cases, we're having it return a console log. You could have it return anything, another function, something like that. But we're keeping it simple. And for both of these things, it's waiting for something to happen, a specific event. We specify the event here, whether it's a connection being open or a port. Then once that thing happens, we return a console log. Went with 8,000. Yeah. Normally I do go with a higher number. Uh, I'm living dangerously today. Rex Racker says, I thought MongoDB was a Python exclusive database engine. No, 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 no. You can use MongoDB just like you could, any database. You can use it with whatever stack you want. I've used it, you know, I've been using it exclusively with JavaScript this entire time from a node server Um, and it interfaces with whatever you want. Although I see how it be use I see how it would be useful with Python. But yeah, I think it works with a lot of different stacks. Yeah. Today I learned. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now with this, our server is going to be able to run. And what I've done here too, just as a little FYI, I know many of you know this already, but um, here I used what's called a template literal to put my variable inside of the string. So when we connect to this, it's going to say server connected on port 4000, right? So you can pass a variable into a string by using tick marks and calling out your variables with, curly braces. So template literal. All right. Another interview question right there. So our server is ready to run. Let me see. Let me think if we need anything else. I think what we can do now is we can actually test to see if our server is going to be able to run. We're not going to pass any data. We're not going to do anything with it yet. But because we've added these console logs, we should be able to test our connections. I think that's probably what I want to do next. I think I have everything. Well, we'll see if it works. All right, let's try it. YOLO, right? All right. So how do I start my server? I'm going to go down in the terminal. How do I start my server? Actually, and Renit says npm start. That would be using a script, but I'm not sure if I've actually specified a script. Let me see. I can check and see if I have a start script. Okay, so I do. Good. I couldn't remember if that was default or not. So there's different ways you can actually start your server, and Renit has mentioned one of them. What if I didn't have a start script? What would I do instead? Or what if my start script was not doing this? It was doing something different. Praising, welcome to the stream. Coming in there with the right answer. Nice. Yeah. Oh, and thank you for the follow, Mixel1. I apologize. I didn't see your follow alert. I have my volume turned down too low. I didn't hear it. So my apologies. I will turn my volume up a little bit so I can actually hear these follows. Mixel, once again, thank you for the follow. Yes, Frezing, you're exactly right. If we didn't have a start script, we could use Node Server JS. So two options: either npm start, which literally runs Node Server JS, or we could just type Node Server JS directly. I'm going to go ahead and use npm start. Oh, and I am going to make sure I save everything first, though. Don't forget that. I do that a lot. I'll do something that I just won't save it. So you have to save first, and then we'll try npm start, and let's just see what happens. Let's see if we've got everything we need. Okay, check it. So we got our two success messages here. We've got server connected on 4000 and connected to MongoDB. And so what that tells us is the two connections that we need for this app to work are both working. So good for us. Stoutfellow says, is it a good idea to use the port number we get from live server or a separate port number? You're going to want to use a separate port number. Otherwise, you're going to get a conflict. So just pick a different port. Like I knew I already had something running on port 3000. So I picked 4000. Just pick a different number every time. You don't want port conflicts. That sucks. Icefire says, uh-oh, Mongo's error. The URI parameter to open URI must be a string. Yeah, so if you're getting an error, there's a couple things you're going to want to check. So make sure that your connection statement here, that your reference to your environment variable is formatted like this. So that's the first thing to check. Does your connection string, or sorry, does your connection method look like this? Process.env, MongoDB URI. Yeah, you need that. That's the most important part. Yep. Because that error where when it says something like URI, open URI must be a string, you're gonna get that generally for two reasons. The first is that you forgot to put your connection string in. You just didn't put it in at all, or you forgot to reference it, like Icefire said. Or the second thing is that you have your password wrong. So generally two. I think the password one tells you like credentials incorrect or something like that in the error itself. So yeah, the URI thing is always a connection string problem. Yeah. So hopefully everybody else is getting these successful connection method messages. and they're cooking. So working. Woo! Good job, Icefire. All right, way to troubleshoot, way to fix it. Good eyes. Engineer says getting something about location global. Is it a MongoDB specific error or is it a node error? Because there's a couple things you should check. Make sure that you're referencing your environment variable just like this. It needs process.env in front of it. Also make sure that you have your require statement for .env at the top, like this. Also make sure you have saved your .env file. So you put your connection string in, you said MongoDB underscore URI and then equals your connection string. You put your password in to the connection string and you have saved it. Those are more common mistakes that I have made in the past. See, we've got some more folks joining us. Welcome in, everybody. If you want the link to the code we are working on, you can do !project in chat. That will give you a link to the starter code, the code we started with, and the finished code to see what it's going to look like when it's done. All right. I'm going to keep on trucking here. And let more do some troubleshooting there. But yeah, if you're just joining us now, I see we've got some new folks coming in. Feel free to join us and code along if you would like to. All right, so we've got our server working. We've got our MongoDB connection successful. I'm going to go ahead and shut down my server for now because we're not ready to use it. And so a quick way I can do that is by hitting the control key and then C. And as soon as I do that, it kills the server. And now I'm just, it's not running anymore. So when we're ready again, I'll fire it back up. But for now, I don't need it to be running. There's nothing wrong with leaving it running, but personal preference. Okay, so we've kind of got all the basic, like this is just the scaffolding, right? This is the basics that we need in order to build the foundation for what we're actually doing with this app. So we've got all this stuff working. Now we can actually start putting some logic in here to handle the data that we're passing in. All right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to get ready to handle that data. So we said earlier that what the form is going to do is as soon as the user clicks submit, that form is going to automatically take all the data, package it up into essentially like a big old object, and it's going to just toss it up to the server like a football. It's going to package it all up and just go, whoop, it's yours now, server. You get to deal with it. So we need to make sure our server is ready to handle that request. And the way we do that is by using Express. We're going to use an Express method to handle that and do stuff with the data. All right, so below my connection here, so your server, generally your app.listen is always going to be last in your server. No matter what else you're doing, your app.listen is generally always going to be last in your server because that's the last thing that we want to happen. We want to initialize all the logic first, and then last thing, we want to actually fire up the server and have it start listening for a request. All right, so this we're going to handle form submission request. So the user has clicked submit. Now we're going to write some code. It's going to handle that request. So remember how we talked about before that Express has built-in methods to handle certain types of requests. We have essentially post, put, post, put, get, and delete. There's others as well, but those are the main four. And so Express actually has those built in as methods. So when a post method is submitted, we can have our server set up to listen for that specific type of request. So we can say something like app.post. And what that's going to do is it's going to say, hey, server, you're probably going to be getting a post request here. And I want to make sure that you are listening for that type of request specifically. And that post request is going to have a specific action within it. We talked about this before. If I go back over to my HTML file, when we configured our form, the only two things we changed were action and method. We set the method to be post, and we set the action to be submit. Because you could have multiple like post requests in an app, right? You could have multiple forms, multiple places where users can submit data, and all of those could be post requests. You can differentiate between those post requests by giving them a specific action or a specific route associated with them. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, Mattel. I'm thinking it's a node error that you're getting. Yeah, that's what it looked like to me, or that engineer more is getting. Yeah. Um, so anyway, so we specified two things in our form. We specified the type of request that it is, and we also specified specifically what action we want to happen or what route we want to take inside of our server. And that's the submit route. So over here on my server, I'm going to mirror that by making sure that my server is listening for a post request, and the specific route is submit. So it's just a roadmap. That's all it is. We're directing this request specifically into this method right here. Finally got connected. Woo! Go Reneats. Yay. Okay, so our submit requests are going to be directed directly in here. And so in here is where we're going to put the function or the logic that we want to happen when this request is received. So what I'm going to do here is essentially then write a function inside of this post request to handle the form data and put it into an object. All right. So submit request. And also too, what we're going to be doing here is essentially is we're going to be packaging up this form data, taking it from the form, packaging it up, formatting it into a way where it's ready to be written to the database, and then trying to write it to the database. So if I'm taking this data, yeah, we connected to MongoDB earlier, right? We got a connection successful request. But at any point, I don't know, the server could go down. Or I don't know, the cloud where MongoDB is hosted could go down. Somebody could, you know, cut a cable at one of those, internet big old internet router places on the East Coast and just completely, take half the East Coast offline. So things could go wrong at any point. A bird could hit some electric wires and make power go out. Who knows? So a request could fail at any point in this process. So if I'm speaking to an outside service with my server, or it could be that it just takes a long time to get there, right? Maybe the request needs to be routed around, 6 different internet hubs throughout the country before it actually gets back to me. So if I want to make sure that I am waiting on this request to complete before I do anything else, I want to make sure that my data is written before I do anything else, or that it at least tries to write it. What type of function should I use here? Because something could go wrong at any point, or things could take much longer than you expect. It could take multiple seconds. What type of function should I use in order to make sure that my server waits on a response of some kind, success or failure, before proceeding with the rest of the logic, or with the rest of the code? Arwin's giving a little clue there. Anybody know what it is? Yeah, Nixel says a promise. Absolutely. More specifically, we're going to be using async, an async function, which is essentially, it's just a promise. It's a newer, fancier version of a promise. All right, so that's what we're going to use. We're going to say async, and what this is going to do is it's going to force a response to be received before this action is completed, right? So either the database says, yep, I can do this, or it says, no, I can't. Either way, we want to make sure that that happens before we go any farther. All right, so post request async, and inside of this request, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take in the data from the form. I'm going to call it form data, and I'm just going to package it up in an object. So, and that object is going to have 4 properties. That object is going to have name, It's going to have people, and these are literally just the fields from the form. It's going to have date, and it's going to have message. This object contains the results from all 4 fields in the form. And inside of each of these fields, we want to essentially populate it with the correct form field. All right. So into this function, I'm going to be reading the data that I'm getting from the form. And that's what this rec is. So REQ, or rec, stands for what? What does rec and res stand for? This is just standard notation for these types of you know, server side functions. Yeah, it stands for request and response. So in this case, the request that we're getting is a big old friggin' object that contains yeah, exactly. Welcome to the stream, Choco. It's a big old friggin' object that contains a crap ton of data, including the form data. So just for funsies, sometime you should try console logging an entire request. Just console log REQ sometime when you're working with an app, when you're building an app. There's a ton of data in there that makes that you do not need, that you need zero, you do not need any of it. But we do want to reach in there and we want to pull out just the parts that we need. In this case, it's just the form data. So inside of each of these fields, I'm going to say rec, and then I'm going to go into that rec object, so rec dot, and then I want to go into the body of the object, because the body is where the actual data lives that you're passing in. So rec.body, and then inside of the body, I want to specifically grab the name field from the form. So we're just drilling down here to the exact field that we need. And we can do the same thing here. Rec.body.people. And then for the date, we'll say new. We want to make sure this is formatted as a date. So we're going to say new date, and then we'll say rec.body.date. And oh, and I'm forgetting I need commas here as well. My apologies. So I always forget my commas. And then we'll say rec.body.message. Now, the reason this works is because in the form, we gave each field a very specific name. So inside of each of these input boxes in the form, we gave it a very specific name. Oh, thank you for the follow, chat. Thanks for joining us. And this name is required if you want to actually make this form data submittable and readable on a server. So you need the name. Oh, Chokomoko, thank you for the follow. So I've forgotten this before, and I'm like, why can't I read my form data? That's because in order for the form to be submittable, when it's packaged up, it is going to assign each field the name that you give it. Okay? So that's why this is required here. All right, now I'm gonna go back to my server. Oh, and I have yes, I have a typo. You're correct. My apologies. There we go. All right, that's fixed. No more red squigglies. All right, so form data, we're essentially digging in here. We're grabbing each of the fields with this appropriate name. We're putting it into an object. We're bundling it all together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try to save that data to the database. So we bundle it all up, and then we're going to try to save it to the database. And yes, we are going to need, did I forget? Oh no, okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, we are going to need an await, but not yet, because we don't need to await this. This is going to happen immediately. We haven't done anything to talk to the database yet. The await part, the await should be assigned to the part that we actually want to wait on. We don't want to wait on this. We want to package this up immediately and get it ready to go. The await needs to be in the part where we're actually sending that data to the database. And so it'll be pretty apparent when we do that. It is about time for a break. So I'm going to go ahead and just set up a try catch block here. It's a catch error. And we can do whatever we want is on an error. I'm gonna have something specific that I specify here, but for now we'll just put a try catch block in. Happy Pixel, thank you so much for the follow. And I will fix my alerts after the stream. You all are giving me some good visuals on how my alerts actually look on a live stream, so I appreciate that. I just revamped everything yesterday, so I'm gonna need to do a few fixes there, but it's all working pretty good, I would say. All right, so let's take a break. When we come back, we're actually going to figure out, okay, we've packaged this data up. How do we deliver it to the database in a reasonable way? How do we deal with errors should they arise? Because we're going to want to tell the user, right? If there's a problem, we're going to tell them, we're going to want to tell them, number one, that it worked, so they know that their data went through. And then number two, we're going to want to tell them if there's a problem and it didn't work. They should, call us on the phone instead, right? So we want to give some feedback to the user either way. So not only are we going to have to figure out how to save the data to the database, but then also how to tell the user if there is a problem. Because console logs tell us that there's a problem as the developer, but they don't do squat for the user, right? User doesn't know what a console log is. They just want to know whether their form went through. So that's what we're going to do when we come back. But for now, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. I'm going to get some more water because I am very thirsty. And I will see you all back here in 5. You should get some water too. All right, BRB. Okay, folks, we got about a minute left in the break. So come on back when you're ready. I got some fresh water. I'm raring to go. I hope you are as well. And Engineer More, it looks like your issue is due to an outdated version of NPM. And so hopefully the link that I provided there in chat, there's several answers there. You could try any of them. Hopefully that helps you. Looks like it may just be an outdated version that's having trouble upgrading. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was muted. Sorry about that. All right, we're back. And yeah, that's a good question from iSpire. That was going to be my other question. Is it actually stopping your server from running, or are you just getting a warning and then, and then below that, are you still getting the messages? Um, yeah, the question I think there is are you still getting, um, are below that warning? Are you still getting like your connection messages? Is your server still starting, uh, even with those messages? I don't know the answer to that. No, it's not running. Okay. So yeah, check out that Stack Overflow post. I think there's like 3 decent answers there that folks tried. One of them is to just edit some npm files. Another one is to um, run some stuff using for Windows specifically, depending on what platform you're on, you can do some stuff in PowerShell. Hopefully that might help fix your issue. Yeah, check that link that I posted there in chat. All right, let's get back to it. To my windows here. Got everything all out of order. All right, so before the break, we essentially we packaged up our form data that we're getting in from those submit requests. When the user clicks submit, we packaged up the form data. And then now we actually want to try to write it to the database and inform the user whether or not that write was successful. And when we're sending data, so as we kind of talked about before, today for our backend, we are using MongoDB, right? And MongoDB is what's known as a NoSQL or non-relational database. Um, there are several different types of databases, but the main two are relational and non-relational. Um, yeah, exactly. Yep. I think that's it. But the question is then how do you fix it? And it seems like the folks in Stack Overflow seem to have some really good solutions that work for a lot of people. So hopefully it works for you. Once again, Stack Overflow for the win. I just don't post anything there. But anyway, so there's 2 main types of databases. There's relational and non-relational. Those are the most common. There are many more, but those are the 2 most common. And so for my day job, I work with relational databases. And as was mentioned before, relational databases are made up of multiple tables. So tables are like a big Excel spreadsheet where data is written in rows, kind of like a ledger or, like a big Excel spreadsheet. You organize your data in rows and columns, and rows are obviously related to each other because they're in the same table, right? They have the same data. The data is very structured. The database needs to be set up in a particular way. And hi, Desired State, welcome to the stream. I would ask that you please be polite. We are here to learn. I'm teaching basic development today, web development today. If you want more advanced topics, there's many lovely people out there who are teaching very advanced topics. So you're welcome to stick around with us. If you are, it sounds like you're pretty knowledgeable. So if you're willing to contribute your knowledge in a helpful and constructive way, you can stick around. Otherwise, I would ask that you please go find another streamer who's more suited to your tastes. All right. So we're talking about databases, types of databases. So relational databases are made up of rows and columns, but today we're using MongoDB as our backend. And so our backend is using MongoDB is great. It's pretty common. We can talk to this database in JavaScript, which is nice. We already know JavaScript, right? But the way MongoDB works is it writes data in document form. So if we go back and look at our database, I'll show you some of the stuff that I already wrote for the finished version of this. And second, so we can see that the data here that's in our database is it's written in basically what we call individual documents, right? So rather than rows and columns, these are individual objects. And so these objects are not related to each other, hence non-relational, right? They don't relate to each other in any way. And that can be a good thing depending on how your data looks. But if your app is relying on the data that it's getting back to have a certain structure, right? In this case, our app is, expecting that our reservation data is always going to be written with these 4 fields. It's possible that data could get passed in wrong or badly formatted, and MongoDB doesn't care. MongoDB doesn't care what you write to it. It's a bucket. You can just dump stuff into that bucket and it can look however it looks. MongoDB does not care. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, like I say. But if I wanted to give my documents more structure, how could I do that, right? Before I write this data to the database, if I want to make sure that all the data going in has a specific structure, what could I do? What could I use to kind of force my data to be structured? A schema? Yeah, yeah. And so a schema is how do we build a schema? What do we use to build a schema? In general, what have we installed that helps us build a schema? What have we installed for this project? I'll be more specific. What have we installed for this project that's going to help us build a schema, build that structure that we want for our data that we're passing to our database? Renee says something with Mongoose. Yeah. You remember how I said earlier that Mongoose is like a helper, right? Mongoose is a helper that helps us do more with MongoDB and add additional functionality to MongoDB. And one of the things that Mongoose allows us to do is it allows us to adds a little bit of structure to our MongoDB data. Because by default, like I said, MongoDB is a bucket. It doesn't care what you put in it as long as it fits in the bucket. Um, and so we can kind of tame that Wild West data a little bit by using Mongoose to build a blueprint and force that data to have a certain structure before it goes into the database. Because if you're familiar with relational databases or SQL databases, you specify you specify structure for that data inside of the database itself. MongoDB doesn't do that, so we have to do it on the app side. Personally, I think that the database should be structured, and but hey, that's just me. I'm a SQL developer, I'm biased. So, all right. So before we write this data, let's give it a little structure. Let's make sure it's formatted correctly, that it has the fields that we want, that basically we're gonna make it a little cleaner. Yes, but something with Mongoose is absolutely correct. So above our form submission request handler here, we're going to define a schema for the form data. And we're going to say const I'm going to call it a contact schema. It's just a blueprint. When we say schema, we just mean blueprint. And I can use mongoose.schema. And essentially what that schema is going to have is exactly the same parameters that we've already stated or that we're already getting from our form, right? So this blueprint, we know it's going to need 4 parts. It's going to need name, It's going to need people. It's going to need date, and it's going to need message. Um, Now, we all know that JavaScript is kind of an anything goes type of language, right? You can take a variable, you can define it as a number, and then you can turn right around and you can put a string in it. And JavaScript just does not care. And so, one of the other things that we can do when we build these types of blueprints is we can also specify like data types. Like, what type of data are we expecting to be passed in with this form? So, for example, won't let you upgrade. Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, you might have just, it might have been a while since you've used Node or something like that. I don't know exactly what the problem is. Maybe some incompatibility with Mongoose or something, or the latest version of Express. But yeah, I hope you're able to get your Node upgraded and try this out later. Yeah, come back for the VOD. Absolutely. Happy Pixel. Yes, you're welcome to ask that question. Absolutely. Um, And they ask, how long have I been doing programming professionally? Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. Let's go ahead and finish. I want to finish this schema. I want to finish our little form submission handler, but I won't forget your question. Okay, I will answer your question. Um, all right. So probably the most common thing that you'll find being done inside of schemas is you will find it defines data types. So, for example, name. If we're talking about data types, just in general, what type of data is a name going to be? What 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 is it? What is it made up of? What is a name made up of? It's a string. Yeah. So we can just specify that, hey, in this blueprint, I'm expecting a name field, and that name field better be a string. If it's not, our submission should be rejected, right? And people. So people is where I you can type in like uh, two or three, right? Technically a varchar, yeah. But in general terms, it's a string. Yeah, exactly. If you want to get specific, it is a varchar. Um, but yeah, so people is going to be a what? Mhm. It's a number. Exactly. And date is obviously a date. Yes. And I'm forgetting commas again. Here we go. And then message is also going to be a string. So what this is doing for us is it's we're going to be anytime we get data, we're going to be able to pass it through this schema, through this blueprint, and we're going to be able to specify, make sure that that data matches the blueprint, right? Let's say that I don't know, I'm not paying attention and I fill out the form wrong, and I put a number in here, and I put technically we have our form formatted so you can't do this, but let's say I accidentally put like the name here and the number of people here. Well, our schema is not going to allow that to pass through. It's not going to allow that bad data to be written into our database, which is really important when you're working with data in large volumes from lots of requests. Or if you have multiple interconnected applications that are reading off of the same collection, this kind of data integrity becomes really, really, really important as your apps get more complex, as you're reading data multiple times in multiple ways. You're having multiple apps or pages contributing to the same data set. That data has to be structured. Otherwise, you're going to get back results you don't expect, and you're going to be screwed. So once again, relational databases do that automatically, but with a MongoDB database, we got to set up a schema in order for that to happen. So that's what we've done here. There's other things you can specify too, such as whether a field is required. So for example, let's say you always wanted them to leave a message of some kind. You could set that field to be 100% always required. Um, and that would basically say, all right, if that is missing, if that field is empty, don't write it to the database. And there's many times when you want to make things required, such as ID values or credential values, that type of thing. Those should always be required. But in this case, we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to leave these just as their type declarations. And now that we've built this blueprint, we can take the form data that we packaged up And we can first pass it through the blueprint, make sure it matches, make sure it's good, and then save it to the database. So that's why we added that extra, step here, because we want to make sure our data is good before we write it. All right. So inside of my try catch down here, I'm going to say const new, I call it new contact originally. I'm not sure if I like that. I'll call it new contact to match the GitHub, but basically what I was trying to say here was new contact just being like a new form submission, a new contact form. Yeah. And oh, and another thing I forgot here too, sorry. After we defined our blueprint, so we defined our blueprint, and then inside of that, right after that, we essentially assign it to a variable. So we can assign our blueprint to a variable called contact and package up our blueprint mongoose dot model inside what's called a model. So our model is going to have a name. We'll just call it contact, and it's going to contain that blueprint. Now, what it could also contain is a specific name that if we wanted to define one, it could contain a specific name for the collection where we want to write this data. So the blueprint is itself how the data should be structured. We wrap that up inside of a model, then we pass the data through the model, through the blueprint, and write it to the specified collection. So that's what it's doing here. The model contains both the blueprint and the collection that we want to write to. We could specify a collection name if we want. Otherwise, if we don't, it's just going to add an S. It's going to just add an S to whatever whatever name we've given the model. So contact, it'll be contacts. If it's, actually, I'm going to call it, and I'm going to call this contact. No, I'll just leave it. I'll write it to my existing. I'll write it to my existing collection. So if you recall earlier, in our connection string, we specified the name of the database that we're writing to, right? But in MongoDB, the way it's structured, you have a database which can contain multiple collections to which we could write. So if you're thinking in terms of relational database, it's sort of like you have a database in a relational database, and you could have multiple tables that you write to, each of them containing a different type of data. And so our model is just specifying which collection we want to write to within that database. That's a little confusing, but once we look at the data inside of MongoDB, once we start writing to it, it'll be more clear of exactly what the difference is between what we specified in our .env file versus what we're specifying here. All right, so we've got our schema, we've got our collection we're writing to. Now, we're going to first pass our data through that model, validated against the blueprint that we already set up. And then assuming that's successful, we are going to try to save that data into our MongoDB database. Now, somebody asked earlier, are we ever going to do an await? We did an async right here, right? We did async. Are we ever going to do an await? And here is where we're going to do the await. New contact dot save. Why did we do the await here? Why did we choose right here to put the await part of our async await function? Why did we do it here? Renit says save is an async method. Stout says have to wait till data is submitted. Yeah, that's it. Exactly right, Stout. Yeah, so we don't want anything else to happen until either that data is saved or it isn't, or depending on what response we get back from the database, right? We are talking to an outside entity, and we don't know how long that save is going to take. It might take 2 milliseconds. It might take 10 seconds, depending on, all sorts of outside factors that we have no control over, right? So we want to make sure that this function does not proceed with anything else until we get either a yes, it worked, or the database says, nope, sorry, I couldn't save this for whatever reason. So this is the part we want to wait on. This is the part we want to await, this save action with an outside database, before we do anything else. Red Slice says, ever consider being a digital nomad and cutting your costs? And I haven't forgotten about the earlier question either about being a programmer. We're almost done with this function, and I'm gonna answer that earlier question. So I hope you're still hanging around. Thank you for being patient. Um, as far as digital nomad, I've thought about it, but I'm fortunate enough to be pretty comfortable in the place that I'm living. So I'm doing okay. All right. So we're going to await that save. And then once the save is complete, if you recall earlier, we said that we want to tell the user that it worked, right? We want to give them like some kind of an indication that, yep, your request went through, hooray, or nope, sorry, it didn't work. Why don't you give us a phone call? So I'm going to use res. Remember, res is response. We want to send a response back to the submitter. I'm just going to say redirect, and we're going to put in a route here. And we'll talk about what this route means in a bit. And so if it worked, we're going to send back essentially success. And if it didn't work, we want to send back whatever the error. Well, we're going to send back a basically an indication that there was a problem. And we'll talk about how this works in a bit. All right, so that's the end of that function. All right, so I wanted to answer the question earlier from, and I apologize, Happy Pixel. Yes, Happy Pixel, if you're still here, I want to answer your question. They said, how long have you been doing? Okay, good. How long have you been doing programming professionally? Yeah, so I have only been, so I've been working with SQL as an, so talking specifically about my day job here, what I get paid for. I don't get paid for this stuff. I don't get paid for web development. I'm not a web developer. I am a senior SQL developer for a major university in the US. And so I've been working with SQL for about 8 years, or well, probably less than that actually, just because off and on times. But I was not a developer. I was an analyst. And so what an analyst does is, or a data analyst, operations analyst, that type of thing. Um, what a data analyst does is they just basically pull data from a database. So they write queries, but they don't really build stuff, right? They some do, but generally what your goal is to pull down data so you can do stuff with the data, right? So you can analyze that data and make charts and graphs and Excel spreadsheets and that sort of thing. So I wasn't a developer. I've only been had the title of developer for about 2 years now. I worked with SQL for a long time. I don't have a computer science background. I just learned everything about SQL on the job, like at work, doing other jobs, learning SQL as part of my job. So I don't have a computer science background. Um, and I didn't think I could be a dev if I didn't have a computer science background. I had this unfortunate misconception that you are not allowed to be a developer if you don't have a little piece of paper that says, I'm good at computer science, which is absolutely not true. And so, fortunately, I finally plucked up the courage to interview for a senior dev role 2 years ago as a SQL developer, and I got the role. So that's been really great. And after I got that role, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm a senior dev now. I only know SQL. I should learn something else, maybe something else other than SQL. And so I decided to branch out, and I found the 100 Devs program, which is a free online program to learn web development. And I did that about a year ago. And yeah, now I'm just building apps left and right. You can check out my, that's primarily what I do here on my stream is I build full stack JavaScript apps, full stack React apps, um, tons of full stack projects here on my stream, my YouTube channel. So you can check out my YouTube archive if you want to see more content like that and build some fun projects. Exclamation point GitHub for my GitHub. Um, yeah. So How long have I been a developer? Not very long, about 2 years. But in that time, I have learned a ton, and I have given back a ton, I think, by, or tried to give back a ton by teaching web development to the community. Yeah, so feel free to ask any follow-up questions if you have them. But yeah, and I say I don't get paid for doing web development, but the reason I do it is because it's fun. It's fun to do one thing at work all day, right? I do SQL, I build ETL pipelines, very back end, very database, very relational, all day at work. And then, on the weekends and nights and weekends, I get to go and write more code, but do something completely different, right? Get to do something completely different than what I do at work, which is really refreshing and really fun and build cool stuff. So for me, that's the fun part. You gotta spice it up a little bit. You gotta have some variety, while still learning something, which I think is just the best possible outcome. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Like I say, feel free to ask follow ups if you have them. No worries, Pixel. Yeah. Also, SQL is great. I love SQL a lot. I don't do web development because I don't like SQL. SQL is still my fave, but web development is fun too. Definitely more flexible. JavaScript is much more flexible than SQL. As we know, JavaScript lets you do whatever you want whenever you want, right? All right. So we've handled our submit request here, and as a reminder, what this is doing is it's listening for a post method request, specifically with the submit route, and it is packaging up the data that we get from our form. So each input box is going to be put into its own part of the object here, right? So we end up with an object with 4 properties here, each one of them containing a specific input box value from our form. And then the next thing it's going to do is it's going to try to pass that data through our blueprint, see if it matches, see if everything is hunky dory coming in from the form. And then it's going to wait for that data to be saved to the database. And then if it is, we're going to be passing a variable. Essentially, this is a variable. We're going to be passing a variable back, which we will set up an alert box to handle that. And if it didn't work, we're just simply going to pass back a message to the user saying, sorry, didn't work. Okay? Happy Pixel says, I don't know anything, maybe like 5% of Python. Hey, you know, everybody's at different levels, right? Everybody can do different things, and there's never a bad time to learn more. And there's so many free resources out there that you can just learn whatever you want. If you want to learn web development, you can check out 100 Devs. Do exclamation point Leon in chat if you want to check out 100 Devs. The Discord is super active. There's going to be a new class, um, free class starting up in January. Do not pay. There's so many free resources out there to learn whatever you want. Don't pay $10,000 for a boot camp, please. I beg. I always beg this, and I love when people learn new things, but you shouldn't have to pay for it because your time is payment enough, right? The time that you spend learning this stuff is payment enough. You shouldn't have to pay money on top of that. Lots of places to learn. Absolutely. Yep. Class starting up again. Yes. Yep. Pretty soon. I don't have any exact dates, but yay. Yeah. All right. So we've got that set up. We are trying to save it. And so we're handling our form requests. We've got that going. Our server's running. We're connecting to the database. We're passing data into the database. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and save. Yeah, I'll show you what this success means. And yeah, because you're wondering, okay, wait, is this going to render a page? Like, how is this going to translate into a client side alert, right? Yeah. And the secret, and I'll share exactly how this works and why, but the secret is in how this route is formatted. So how it looks is the secret to what it's going to do on the client side. And I promise we'll get into that in just a minute. All right. So I have to have a little cliffhanger there for you. All right. So we've got this. Let's see. What are we doing? We've got all our stuff defined. We're connecting to our database. We've defined our blueprint. We're handling our form submission request, and our server works. Okay, cool. So I think, are we good to go? We might be good to go. Are we good to go? Let's see if we're good to go. What do y'all think? Are we missing anything? Dun dun dun. Are we missing anything? That's all right. We're gonna find out in just a minute. We're gonna see it. Let me know if you think we might be missing anything and what that might be. If we want to make this an actual full stack functional application. But let me know if you catch it. Otherwise, we'll figure it out very shortly. What's missing, Icefire? I'm gonna go ahead and do npm start. It'll work. It'll run. Since you're asking, yes. What might that be? Icefire says posting the data. Nope, we're doing that right here. Boop. That's what we're doing. New contact.save. What that's doing is it's saving to the database. So we got that covered. But all right, well, we'll find out what we're missing here. And yeah, we did. We saved. Yep, exactly. All right, so our server is running. We're connected to MongoDB. Okay, so and we're running on localhost 4000, right? All right, so I'm going to go to localhost 4000 and I'm going to see if I can submit a form. New tab, and I'm on 4000. That's where my stuff is running, right? So I'm going to go there. I'm going to see if I can submit a form. Okay, actually, I think we might be good. Never mind. We might not be missing anything. Let's make sure of that. What I was thinking happened, what I was thinking might happen, actually may not have happened. Okay, so that's working. I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to double check. May have outfoxed myself. 1,000. I was thinking that we might have to set up a route for our homepage, but instead, it seems to be working just fine. So let me know if it's working for you. I'm curious. Not seeing your peach page. So what are you seeing, Icefire? It may be because I'm thinking it may have been related to some of the other work I was doing. I may have, yeah, we'll see. What are you seeing instead? Because I think I know what you might be seeing. It says I can't reach this page. Yeah. And you did npm start, right? You started your server, localhost port number. Yeah, it's going to be something like localhost, 4000 or yep, it's running. And you went to localhost whatever you specified, whatever port number you specified. Right. Okay. Yeah. So what I was thinking was missing and why I was thinking this wouldn't work was because we didn't yet set up an actual route to serve our homepage. We didn't actually set up a route for that. So when it gets this, uh, when our site gets this request for the homepage, is it going to know what to serve? What page is it going to serve? So in my original version, I actually had, in order to get it to work, I had to set up a route for the homepage. I'm not quite sure why it's working just fine right now, but I think we're going to go ahead and set up that route anyway because it sounds like it's not working for everybody. Yeah, we would need an app.get, right, to actually when the route is passed, when that homepage route is requested by the user, they visit the homepage for the website. We need to pass a route and tell our server, "Hey, serve up the homepage, please." Yeah. So just like we did for post, we're going to create another route and put it down here, right here, above our start server, and we'll say app.get. Remember, this is just another type of method that Express recognizes. So earlier we did post for form submission. But by default, a GET request is basically if you want to read some data. In this case, we want to deliver the homepage. So app.get, when the user or the visitor heads to the homepage, by default, the route being passed is just a slash, just like that. All right, so now we just tell Express, hey, when they visit the homepage, when they visit the homepage, send our HTML, send our index.html. And there's a couple different ways we can do that. I'm going to use send file, but I mean, we could do res.render. There's various different ways we could do that. But I think send file is maybe a bit more unusual. So you should be able to recognize it and know what it's doing. So I'm going to go ahead and use it here. Public index.html. And actually, oops, I think the reason it may be working is just the way that I did things. I did things in a slightly different order here than I did in the original version. So I think in the original version, I may not have had a public file right away. I may have been trying to serve it from another location. So I don't remember honestly, but when you're building something from scratch, you do things in a different order. So I think I needed to add this because I didn't have things in the location that, was being expected by default. So either way, this isn't going to hurt anything, adding it in. And this just gives more examples of how we can use Express to specify specific routes and what we want delivered from each route. So for example, if I had, let's say, multiple pages in this application, right? If I had multiple pages in this application, I could specify on the front end, on the client side, I could set up a link and have it go to, I don't know, slash about us, right? I could have that link pass the route slash about us. And then on my server side, I could simply have app.get slash about us and have it deliver the about us page. So that's how we would do that. Yeah, so you can try adding that Icefire and see if it delivers your homepage successfully. Now, in my case, this wasn't necessary, but I think it's still fine to add it. Because also by default, we have already told Express that all of our static pages live here in the public folder, so that may be why that's not necessary. Not yet. Okay, what can you, Icefire, can you specifically paste in the error that you're getting? That may be helpful in determining what's going on. So like when you visit the page, when you visit localhost, whatever, it may show an error on the page itself, and that can tell you what the problem is. Localhost refused to connect. Okay, so that means that this page can't reach this page. Localhost refused. Yeah, so that means that your server most likely isn't running, or you're trying to visit the wrong localhost. So two things there: either your server isn't running at all, or you're trying to go to the wrong port for your localhost. Rex Record says, "How do I get better at explaining things as you do?" I think so. Practice, number one. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, right? I mix things up all the time. Um, there you go. Now you got it. Yeah, good job, Icefire. But the main things that I do is, yeah, number one, practice. Over time, you get a better feel for what things work for some and not for others, right? What if people, if I explain something in a way that only makes sense to me and chat is like, what the heck are you talking about? Then I know that I should explain it a different way. And so over time, you start to shape the way you talk about certain things, or you start to learn the common pitfalls that people encounter over and over and over, and the mistakes that they make over and over as you talk about the same thing multiple times. Um, no, I was not born this way. Absolutely not. I think very few people are. Some people, yes, are glorious beings that have this incredible talent as public speakers or that sort of thing. And I am most definitely not. Um, I uh, I won't go too deep into my history, but I spent a lot of time very solitary as a kid, mostly just because of the place I grew up in. I grew up in a very rural location where there just wasn't a lot of people around, and so I didn't talk to a lot of people a lot. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of social skills. I didn't have a lot of speaking skills, especially in front of others. Um, and so again, a lot of it is practice. But as far as specifically explaining things, how I like to think of it is I like to think of it how I would like it explained to me if I was looking at something for the first time. I think the mistake that a lot of experts make when they try to talk about their passions or the things that they enjoy is that they can't remember how it felt to see it for the first time. Um, they can't remember how to break it down because it's just so easy for them. They assume that, oh, yes, this is just rudimentary. Everybody knows this already. I'm going to go very quickly or I'm going to skip over it. And that's a very common pitfall. I think the best thing to do is take yourself out of your own head and go back and say, all right, how would I how would I view this as if I was looking at it for the first time? Um, and to me, that's the true test also of whether I understand something is can I take it and explain it to somebody like they're looking at it for the first time? That's really difficult sometimes. Um, and if you can break something down into first principles, by that I mean very simple terms or use analogies to help, that shows a true understanding on the speaker's part and it helps facilitate understanding on the learner's part. Yeah. And another way that's true. Another way is to record yourself and watch and listen back and say, all right, am I speaking in a way that makes sense from the outside, right? Again, it's all about taking yourself out of your own head and seeing yourself as others might see you, as the people listening to you might see you. And you'll find that I use analogies a lot, comparisons to other things that people might be familiar with, so that they can draw associations in their head between two topics. So earlier, for example, I said, how middleware is like the post office, right? How the post office translates poorly my terrible handwriting on an address into something that can actually make it to its destination. And so if you can think of real world examples or analogies, things that other people are already familiar with, to make something less scary. A lot of what we encounter in programming and coding looks very scary at first, right? It's all what is this nonsense? Like what the heck is this? You read it and you're like, what the hell? Um, and so I think part of it is just making it less scary because making it less scary removes those barriers that we put up in our brain. When we see something scarier or something unfamiliar, our brain is going to go, nope, I don't want to devote resources to deal with that. Like, nope, that's too hard. Can't deal with it. I'm not going to devote any brain power to trying to figure that out. And that happens a lot. It doesn't happen to everybody. Some people are very like, I have to know, but a lot of the times it's scary. It's too unfamiliar. It's too hard. And so one of the best things we can do for others is break it down and make it less scary and easier to tackle. Uh, Maybe it's using analogies. Maybe it's breaking it down into smaller pieces. There's lots of different ways to do it. So that was a very long-winded answer, but I hope it helps. And anybody can do this. Um, with practice. Just like with it's not going to come immediately, but you will be doing yourself and others a service if you are able and willing to practice your ability to teach others because it helps you truly understand the material and it helps others learn the material as well. So it's a win-win for everyone. That's why I started doing it. Honestly, that's why I started streaming was because in 100 devs, I knew that I just would not do the work. I would not do the work if I didn't have some kind of an impetus or a reason to do it. And so for me, this was necessary in order to actually get stuff done. Um, and it helped me get a better understanding as soon as I started talking to other people about it. Yeah. Safety says this is also a necessary skill once you're in a job. Explaining things to higher ups is a skill. Absolutely. I love that you brought that up. Um, explaining so I love that. This is like one of my passions is one of the most common problems in a project, like in a work related project. One of the most common issues and problems that comes up is when very technical people, technical experts have to explain something to either customers or management. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I mean, rightfully so, a lot of, technical people feel very put upon and very, deprived of resources or put under incredible, unreachable deadlines because there's a lack of understanding on management's part and on the customer's part of what work is actually occurring. And so being able to explain technical things to non-technical people is a skill that many teams lack. And it's not their fault. I mean, that's not what they are hired to do, but it's a skill that many teams lack. And that's why there's specific roles now that are popping up, such as, developer relations and business analysts and that type of thing, that are literally translators between customers and technical teams. And so if you are a technical person, if you're a developer who can also do that, you can explain things to management and customers in a way that they say, oh my gosh, I get what you're doing now, then that is a massive asset. And I spent, actually, when I was an analyst, I did a lot of that. I worked with development teams. I translated these very technical things for between the business side and the tech teams, so that it would reduce that friction that inevitably occurs when both sides fail to understand what the other side is asking for. Yeah. Explaining things to higher ups is a skill, and yes, higher ups and customers, just anybody non-technical in when you're in a developer role. Absolutely. I think it's fun to try to figure out the right explanation to help someone, and it's interesting when someone sees things so uniquely that you really have to stop and think about how best to help them. Yeah, sometimes people come at something from an angle, and you're just like, man, I never would have thought about it that way, but I guess you're right. Yeah. Or they misunderstand something so profoundly that you really have to go back a few steps and say, okay, let's start over, and let's take it from the very beginning. And then that's another thing too, a mistake that a lot of people make when they're trying to help someone who doesn't understand something, is that sometimes you do have to go back a few more steps because something fundamental is missing. um, you know for example, like maybe you're trying to explain, you know why an error message is coming up. But that's why one of the questions that I asked earlier for folks is, do you have Node installed, right? You might think, oh yeah, everybody has Node installed, but they don't always. Sometimes I've had folks on stream before who are trying to follow along and they're trying to build their app, and they're getting errors, and they're like, I don't know what's going on, and because they don't have Node installed at all. And so sometimes you have to step back a little further than you think. No, you're totally fine, Rex, and that's a question I'm always happy to ask, or sorry, happy to answer. Mavi says, I had to explain hash maps, and I think I did a crappy job with the analogies. People said they got it. That's all that matters, right? You're a dev and you try to say angle, and angular tries to come out instead. Yeah, it's funny. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so where did we get? We did this, we did our app.get, which in my case wasn't necessary, but I think it's still important to show the different types of express methods that you could call here. We did that, we did that. I think we might be done on the server side. So yeah, I think we're good there. Let's see if we can write. Let's see if we can write something to the database. We should be able to now. We've set up everything, all of our architecture. We haven't set up our little alert box yet, but we can try to submit a form, and then we can see if that data shows up in the database. And then if it does, then we'll write our little alert box. All right. So I'm at my localhost 4000 here. I'm going to go down to my form, and I'm just going to fill it out. I'm going to give it a specific name here so I know it's from this session. And then we'll say 2 people, and just fill in whatever date, right? And we'll just say this is the first test on stream. There we go. All right, we'll send this. Let's see what happens. Mindless Pizzeria. Y'all are gonna make me hungry. All right, send this. Okay, good. So a couple things happened. We got redirected back to the homepage. Now, if I scroll back down to the bottom, or I can just click this link here. If I scroll back down to the bottom, we can see that this has cleared itself out. Mostly, it chose a sort of a generic date there for the calendar. That's probably the earliest date on the calendar. So it's cleared itself out. The form is empty now, which is default behavior for forms, by the way. After you submit a form, its default behavior is to reload the page. and clear the form. But notice what happened to our, let me take this off. Notice what happened to our URL. Localhost 4000 slash question mark success. So if you recall, we set that up, right? We set it after the submission is successful. We do a redirect and we pass question mark success. So that's coming through as part of the URL when we go back to the home page. So we can, once we have confirmed that our data is writing to the database, we're actually going to make use of this to determine which alert box to fire. All right, but first let's check the database. Go back to my database. And I'm going to be writing to my existing collection. So I can just, I'm going to refresh it here. Not that one. That's a different project. But it's down here. Restaurant reservations. So this is my database that I specified. Remember, we specified this name inside of the connection string, right? We specified this name inside of the connection string. And then in here, this is where we specified the collection name. So the database name is specified in the connection string. The collection name, so you can have multiple collections inside of a single database, that is specified inside of the model. So our Mongoose model is where we specify that. All right. Okay, there we go. So I don't know if you can see that, but scroll down. There we go. Our data has written successfully to the database with our message, the name, all that good stuff. Yay, Renit says it works for me. Awesome. I'm glad it worked for you, Renit. Hey, LN Media, good to see you. You know, you're a dev when you search on Google, instead of pressing enter, you press Control S. Well, the problem that I encounter a lot is, so it seems like every language, this is just my pet peeve. It seems like every language has a different format for comments. And so what I find myself doing a lot is at work, I'll try to write comments in SQL, like in SQL code, and I will use the JavaScript syntax for comments. And then here I'll try to write a comment in JavaScript and I'll use SQL syntax. So that's what I mess up a lot is comment syntax. Mixel says, will the stream be saved here or somewhere else to rewatch? It will be saved here on Twitch for 60 days. You can go to the videos tab on my channel to see that. Now, after 60 days, Twitch automatically deletes them. So I move them to my YouTube archive, which you can find at !YouTube in chat. Do that. It'll give you a link to my channel. That's my entire archive. That's where all my videos end up. Yes, so Icefire, that's just how the date is saved. It looks a little weird, but that's how dates are saved in MongoDB. Now, when you pull them back down, if you were to pull these back down into your app, you would then translate them into, you know, whatever format you want. But Icefire says, I think that's my whole entry for each form. I'm not quite sure what you've given me there in chat. If you've set up your object correctly, it should have these 4 properties right here. So if you fill out the form completely, then you know, you would see all 4 of these things populated. Just getting ID, date, and V. So that what that probably means is that the name of the input box in your form, so in your HTML, the name of the input box doesn't match the name that you specified on your server when you were pulling that data out and putting it in the object. So you need to make sure that, especially capitalization matters. So your capitalization could be off. So check the name property of the form in your HTML. Make sure it matches exactly with capitalization and everything. Make sure it matches exactly the values that you're pulling out of that request body and putting into the object. Okay, so that rec.body.whatever, that you know, rec.body.whatever has to match the exact name of the input box that you're putting in there. VS Code is a shortcut for comments, puts in the right type according to which file type you use. That's nice, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't use VS Code at work. I use PL SQL Developer, and it's not that cool. Yes, lowercase. That'll do it. Yep, case matters. Yeah, good catch though. Good troubleshooting. Okay. Yeah, so we're writing to the database. So now let's set up our alerts. So we want to tell the user, right, that this actually worked. And so we know already that we're getting this success route passed back to the user. So that works. So now let's do something with it. Let's show them an alert box that says, "Yay, it worked. Your reservation has been placed," or "Sorry, it didn't work. Please give us a phone call." So with that, since we're passing data back to the front end now, we're essentially done with our server. Our server is working. We're good with that. No more that we need to do there. So now if we want some logic on our client side, on the HTML side, we need to do that inside of our client side JavaScript. And you got it. No, you figured it out. You figured out what was missing. I just kind of pushed you in a certain direction. So you got it. So we have some client side JavaScript already, if you don't recall. We have some client side JavaScript for our menu. So our tabbed menu here. It does just a little bit of JavaScript to essentially allow you to click these links and show and hide the menu items for each topic. So we already have some client-side JavaScript here. So we're just going to add some additional JS to take in that value that we're getting back from the server and display the appropriate alert box. Script time, yeah. All right, so let's do that. So remember, I'm inside of my script.js now. We're out of server.js. We're inside of script.js because this is client-side code. This has nothing to do with the server. All right, so I'm gonna push this tab menu down a little bit. Just make some space up here. Not that much. That's good. All right, and we're gonna do our alert box display success failure. Okay. Now, what I want to happen, my desired end case here is that as soon as the person hits submit, the server grabs the request, it tries to save the data, either it can or it can't, and it immediately should pass back success or failure. And when the page reloads, so when the page reloads after that submission, it should then also throw up the alert box. I want that to be immediate on when the page loads. So one way we can do that is by saying just window.onload. So when the window loads or reloads, you can do something. So when the window loads, do a thing. When a window loads, look for success or failure and throw up an alert box. Now, where do we want to look for that information? We want to look for that information inside of the URL, right? As soon as this works, we want to look inside the URL and see whether this says success or whether it says failure. So how do we look inside of the URL? You can just say const URL params, where param stands for parameters. And there's something we can use here that allows us to simply search inside of a URL. So we could say URL search params. And what this allows us to do is to take a URL and search inside of it for something. It essentially look inside of the URL for something and then do something with that information, whether it's true or false. And essentially what we're doing here first is we're actually looking inside the URL and just storing it in this variable. So look inside the URL, get the bits that matter and store them inside of this variable. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but we want to look in the specific URL that's like the current one and the window we're in. So we're in the current window, look in there and look for parameters. And I need to sneeze. Give me one moment. Excuse me. Thank you. Okay, so look inside the URL, get any parameters that are being passed in, and we'll talk about how we identify parameters in a second. Thank you. So now we just check and see which one it is. If URL params has success, I can't spell, there we go, success. And you could probably do a ternary here as well if you wanted, but I'm being more explicit here since this is kind of a new topic. We can say reservation successful. Else if URL params as, did I say error or did I say failure? I don't remember. I think I said failure. Did I? I don't remember. Hang on. No, it's error. Okay. URL params has error. Then we just, say whatever alert message we want. I said something about there was an error in making the reservation. Please call phone number instead. Code Horse feeds on ternaries. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too is whenever I introduce something new, such as this, another little teaching tip here is that I try not to use multiple pieces of shorthand at once. So in this case, we're kind of doing something new here. And so I'm not going to try to do this in a ternary, even though you probably could, because I don't want it to be too hard to parse when you're just looking at it for the first time. So let's not use too many separate variables all at once. If we're introducing something new, let's take it back to first principles. In this case, just an if statement, while we learn what this new thing is doing here. So all we're really doing here is we're taking the URL. In this case, it's localhost 4000 / success, and we're looking in it for params or parameters. And what parameters are essentially almost like variables that can be passed inside of URLs. And all we're doing here then is we're saying, all right, if the parameters that we found contain success, then do this. If the parameters that we found contains error, then do this. And so this question mark here inside of our URL is actually very important, because if I took out this question mark, and I did this, I can't read that, that's too small. If I took out the question mark and did this, it's going to say something like cannot get success or cannot get failure. Because without the question mark, what is it trying to do? When it says cannot get / success, what is it trying to do? Yeah, it's trying to display a page, right? That's not what we want. We're essentially trying to just pass a variable. We don't want it to navigate anywhere. We want it to go back home and basically ignore all the stuff past the question mark, right? We don't want it to pay any attention to anything past the question mark, because that has something to do with our client-side JavaScript. It doesn't have anything to do with a page or anything that our server has to worry about. And so what the question mark does is it essentially converts this reference to success from a page to a variable. So we can pass this now successfully without our server trying to frantically render a page that it can't find. As soon as we do that, and I'm zoomed way in here, there we go. As soon as we do that, it takes us back to the home page successfully, and it ignores anything past the question mark. And then when we use this search functionality, we can search through those items that are past the question mark and use them to make a decision on our client side. Okay? Now I'm going to save this, and I think I should just be able to reload this. Yeah, there we go. So if after I save that, now that I reload the page, it's looking through this URL and it says reservation successful. And I say, okay, and we're good to go. Now, what is error? I think was when I said error. Do that. All right. When I do that, I get my error message. There was an error making the reservation. Please call whatever. Code horse. Come on, use one letter variables at least. Yeah, never. So, yeah, so this allows us to essentially use pass variables back and forth inside of our URLs to make certain things happen, either on our client side or our server side. I think, I was trying to remember what project I've done this on. I did this in the other direction on another project where we passed data in a similar way using the question mark to make it into a variable. But like from the client to the server, because this information was only needed in controllers that were on our server side. And so we just passed in some extra data in the URL, um, in the route, and read the route and then used that question mark to also contain some additional data. And I don't remember what it was. Oh, I think it was when we were, I think I've used it before when you have data from, like, say, multiple users. Let's say you have a list on a page of, let's say, multiple user profiles. We'll just say that. Well, multiple user profiles, each of those profiles is functionally identical, and we're generating them like using React or EJS or some dynamic method of, let's say I could have X number of users at any given time, right? I could have 0 users, I could have 100 users. And so I'm not going to hard code all of those values. I'm going to use something like EJS or React to generate that list dynamically every single time the page loads. And let's say I have something like an edit button next to each user profile. And so that edit button is also being dynamically generated. Nothing is hard coded, it's being generated in code based on the count of users that I have. And so when I click on that edit button that's next to a user's name, I need some way for my server and my controllers to know which button was clicked. And so how I've used, this type of thing before is passing in not only, hey, somebody clicked the edit button, but also the ID, the MongoDB ID or whatever, some unique identification for the user whose name that button is next to. So in that list of 100 edit buttons, which one did I click? Which user am I trying to edit? So you can pass in like the ID and that type of thing. So that's another way that you can use, data enclosed in routes, in order to not render a page, but to help your controllers or your server or your client actually interpret that and make the correct decision based on what you're telling it. Um, so I hope that makes sense. I know that's a little confusing, but as you start using, dynamic methods of generating data or generating lists or generating buttons, things that aren't hard coded, you need some way to tie a button press to a particular user action or a particular list item. And that's, I think, what we find ourselves doing quite a bit is passing that information in as part of a route, and then interpreting that data on the server side in a controller, saying, oh, they clicked on user XYZ. That fellow says, are there other ways for the client side to check success and failure outside of checking URL? Check success and failure outside of checking URL. It depends on how you've built your app. I'll say that. You're kind of limited when you're dealing with static HTML like we are here, right? We built this in static HTML. Um, so any thinking or logic that we're doing has to be done in client side JavaScript, because HTML is not smart enough to do anything. It just renders itself and that's it. So you need some kind of a logic, right? Um, you can deliver a specific response, like DRock says. Many APIs can return a success fail state when you do a post. Yeah, you can get a response back, depending on how you build it. And so then you can interpret that response. I would guess I was thinking it more along the terms, more along the lines of, how does your client side know what to do? Um, and so it depends on how you build it. So something like with something like EJS or React, you can have a more direct logical communication between your front end and your back end. Like with EJS, you can pass you know values kind of straight into your EJS and have your page change behavior based on that. Um, but with React, there's even more close synergy between just like user interface and logic, right? That's how it's built. But yeah, you can also use an API success fail state a response from your directly from the API in that way. Um, so yeah, similar how you return values on a Git. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so I think we've got everything working. Um, Good question so far. Yeah, I think that was all we really needed to do here. So I think we're pretty much done. I know we kind of skipped the last break there. I did want to just power through and get this last bit done. Um, and I've still got some water left. So, but yeah, I think that's it. What we've done here is we have basically taken a static site with no back end at all, even no way to, no host for it. And we've turned it into a full stack project. So we added a server, we've added a backend, we've added database storage. Now, a logical next step for this would probably be some maybe another page, right? And maybe another page that could display the reservation, right? We have this big list of reservations that we're capturing, right here, but they only live in the database right now, right? We have no way to fetch them as a list and display them for, let's say, maybe the restaurant owner to see who's requesting reservations. And you could even add functionality to delete a reservation, to I don't know, to edit a reservation, like from the administrator side, from the restaurant owner's perspective, to edit a reservation, delete a reservation, do these CRUD operations against the database um, after this data has already been submitted. And so for me, that's kind of what I would see as the next logical step for this. And also, hand in hand with that, if you're creating some kind of an administrator page, you're probably going to want authentication, right? Probably going to want some kind of authentication to log in as the owner and be able to show that additional page. So if you were wanting to take this and use it for a real client or something of that nature, to me that would be the next logical step would be to create an administrator page and to add authentication to protect that page from just anybody being able to see it. Right. So now, usually at the end of streams like this, I like to kind of just take some time and I don't know, have a conversation, have a chat. If you have questions, I can answer questions. It doesn't have to be about this project; it can be about whatever you want. If you have feedback on the new layout for the stream, I'm happy to hear that as well. Yeah, whatever you all want to chat about for a minute. Mavi says we could put little tables. I assume you mean like restaurant tables for the user to click the one they want, but we won't because they better pay for that one. Yes, yeah. If you're building a site like this for a client, um, any additional functionality like that, you would definitely want to make sure that that's written into your contract and that you are charging additional for those additional features. Put the reservation to the owner's cell phone. Yeah, I don't know if they would want that. Yeah, maybe too. There's some. Well, I think that's why I think the next step would be some kind of an interface where like the maitre d or whoever the host of the restaurant could just see a list of everybody's reservation in the order they were submitted, um, in chronological order, and confirm them or delete them or edit them as needed. I think that would be helpful for them from a business point of view. All right. Any questions? Oh, and the other thing I did want to mention here, we were talking about like URL search params and like as. Um, so I did want to mention that like you can look in the MDM docs and learn about all these kind of we use some unusual methods today, just mostly for fun. Um, Interesting ways to do things, maybe slight shorthand ways to do things if you're already familiar with full stack apps. And you can find references to all these things inside the MDM web docs, how they work, what they do, what information they take. Um, so, for example, here's a URL, https example.com, and then we have our question mark. And then we have not just one, but one, two, three parameters that they're passing in. And another thing I wanted to mention here is that you will often see things like this used with APIs. And I can't believe I forgot to say this before. I meant to say it earlier. But you'll often see this kind of syntax, the question mark, and then it's really small. Let me make it bigger. The question mark signifying, hey, there's going to be some parameters here. And then the ampersands dividing those parameters. That's often how you can communicate with APIs, is that they will expect you to pass a URL. So this would be like the URL for the API, and then I'm talking outside APIs, and then question mark, and then what you want from that request, and with one or more parameters. Yeah. Maybe add email to the form to confirm according to availability. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot that before, but luckily it's pretty easy to modify a form to add an additional value. You would just then need to make sure that you also add that additional value to the server as well, right? Make sure you modify your schema to include that value, and make sure that you're handling that appropriately on the server side. Customer probably receive an email confirming the reservation with the info they provided. Yeah, that could be something that you would do with I would maybe once like the on the second page you would add with the full list of reservations. There could be a little confirm button, and then what that would do is it could send an email to the customer saying, yeah, your reservation is confirmed. Mm-hmm, exactly. I think, and as far as like these URL parameters go, I think um, the most I've ever had to use them when talking to an outside API was with the Jeopardy API. So the Jeopardy API has a ton of different ways you can, a ton of different types of data you can request. You can request categories, questions by date, all that sort of thing. And so you really have to specify that in your request exactly what you want from that API. So I think that was the most interesting example that I've encountered of URL parameters. Southfellow says, oh, so essentially the same process of checking the URLs. If I was to create a project that uses APIs like Dog API, Weather API. Yeah, and actually, let me see here. Let me see here. I'm gonna go. Let me see. This is the one. I don't remember if this is the one I'm thinking of, but we shall see. I don't remember the structure of this. I also don't remember where anything is. Oh, not in there. Yeah, here we go. Yep. Okay, so what this is doing is we're making a fetch to the Jeopardy API. And what we're trying to do is we're inside the this is a React app. You don't have to know anything about React. We're just going to be looking at a URL here. So this is a React app I built, which essentially generates a Jeopardy board. And how it does that is it goes up to the Jeopardy API and it pulls back data about a bunch of different questions. Um, so it pulls back the categories and then it pulls back all the questions, enough questions to populate a Jeopardy board. Um, and so what we're doing here is we're creating this board component, and then we're going up to the Jeopardy API. And this says localhost 5000, but it's hitting the Jeopardy API. Um, and it goes to the API, and the first thing we do is we look for categories, and then we have this question mark right here. And this is where we specify like our variables. This is where we specify um, how many we want. So count equals 6. And then we use the ampersand to say, all right, this is another variable. And then I have an offset value. So it's just a random, it randomizes the categories that we get back. But it's two separate variables. So count 6 and then offset whatever. Lost in Jeopardy. Yeah. So this is an example, right? We're doing routing. We're saying, all right, go to the API, go to the categories, and then we have these variables that aren't pages. They're just information we want the API to know. And then we do it again down here. Same thing. API, go to the clues page or clues location, I guess, and then we specify a category. So same there. Yeah. So you'll see this a lot. You'll see these parameters a lot when you are working with outside APIs or when you build your own API and you want people to access it in different ways. Scotty says, answered mine wolf question. Who is the GOAT full stack teacher on Twitch? Oh, thank you. Yeah. But yeah, I meant to mention that earlier about the API thing and I just completely forgot. So I'm glad I remembered eventually. So I hope that makes sense how these parameters are not only useful on the client side, but I find more often useful going the opposite direction. You're passing data from your client up to an API to tell it what you want. Alrighty. Any other questions? Any other things topics you wanted to discuss? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and look for somebody to raid, but I'm always happy to have a little free-form discussion at the end. Hmm. By the way, I mentioned the reason we didn't have a stream last week um, is because I was going to go see Hamilton live for the first time. I've seen it on Disney, but I went to go see that, and it was really good. I was so happy with that. Super fun. So had a great time. Happy Pixel says, "Are you streaming on schedule?" Yes. If you, I believe if you go to my channel, and I believe there's a schedule tab, and you can click on that. Right now, I only stream once a week. That may change with the new year. We'll see. I haven't settled on that, but generally, while 100 devs classes are occurring, I will do 2 streams per week. But in the off season, it's only one. But it's generally on Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern, so you can translate that into whatever your local time zone is. Gotcha. Yeah. Ooh, Somebody, somebody just honked a horn outside and it scared the bejesus out of me. All right. Renate says, Stoutfella says, thanks again. I'm from the original 100 devs. Also good to get a refresher course on full stack. Oh, thank you for the follow, Stoutfella. Much appreciated. Renate says, is 100 devs front end only? Oh, no, 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 no. 100 devs is full stack. So you learn the way it works is you learn generally front end things first, basic HTML, basic CSS, just to allow you to. The goal is not to, give you a degree in computer science. The goal is to teach you to start being a web developer and making money, to get a job as a web developer, to be able to freelance as a web developer, to get money by being a web developer. And so the way it works is you learn how to build static sites first, like we did with this one originally, right? We built this one as just static HTML, CSS, no backend at all. And then in 100 devs, you eventually then graduate to learning JavaScript. You then graduate to building your own APIs, or then you learn how to use existing APIs and bring that data into your applications, and then you learn how to build your own APIs, and then you learn how to use databases to store data long term. MongoDB, potentially maybe in the next cohort they'll finally show some love to SQL, but we'll see. Um, but at least one, at least MongoDB to learn how to build truly full stack soup to nuts applications. I says regular job keeps me busy, but watching 100 dev streams with your follow up streams is my favorite hobby. Hey, that's a great hobby to have. Yeah, and not everybody's going to have the time or the means to be on the Discord and typing up a storm there. But as long as you do something, right? Ellen says I'm finally in Leon's Discord as lovable narwhal. That's awesome. So we'll see each other around. Discord is a great resource. It absolutely is. Yeah, there is if you're interested in joining 100 devs, there's a really, really, really active Discord. We're talking thousands of active members. You can get a link to that by hitting exclamation point Leon in chat, and I'll do that for you. There we go. So the second link there is for the Discord, and what that will do is it will give you an invite directly into the Discord, and you can join. And start asking questions or contributing your knowledge if you're already knowledgeable about development. If you do go to the Discord, note that there are very strict rules on advertising. So you are not allowed to solicit anybody to pay you for knowledge. Your knowledge should be freely shared if you are already a developer or whatever. So don't go advertising, pay me $100 an hour or whatever. That's not going to work. You're going to get banned. Also, you need to be polite. You need to be respectful to others. The same rules as my channel, right? No different. You all are already used to those rules. And so you should fit in great there. If you're a regular viewer of mine, you should fit in just fine. Engineer, you got it! Woo! You got your server connected and running. That's awesome. Way to go. Gosh. Yeah, what was the problem? Did you have to go in and edit all those files and, you know, totally reinstall Node? Completely uninstall Node. Wow. It must have just been so out of date that it couldn't upgrade. That's wild. Gosh. But great work, by the way. That's an incredible challenge. Yeah, it's odd that it would suddenly start misbehaving like that because I was trying to think. I don't know that I've ever had to like manually upgrade Node in that way. I don't know. Who knows? Computers are weird sometimes, right? Layla says, "What was your favorite song performed live at Hamilton?" I think what was really cool for me was that I looked up. So this was not a Broadway performance; it was an off-Broadway performance. But I looked up the entire cast beforehand, right? Because I thought, I want to know who's in it, and I looked up the entire cast beforehand, so I kind of knew what they looked like and all. Um, and then we get there, and I was really enjoying the show, like all the way up through the first intermission. But something was just in the back of my head. I was like, something's different here. And then I realized I looked at the program. I was just kind of thumbing through the program, and I noticed that the person playing Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, the lead role, was not the person who was indicated in the program as playing him. It wasn't the understudy. It wasn't the understudy's understudy. It was the very last guy, like in the list of guys to play that role. He had his picture in the program, but he was the last one like in there. So something must have happened. Like I don't know, food poisoning, like who knows, something crazy must have happened. And this dude had to step up last minute and into the lead role, and he crushed it. He was amazing. He did a fantastic job. He was perfect. Like just utterly aced the role. His voice was beautiful, and like this dude, some kind of a last minute catastrophe, and this dude stepped up and crushed it. Um, and like he was sweating buckets the entire time. Like you could tell he was like absolutely just sweating like crazy. But he was fantastic. And like I said, it took me to the intermission to notice it wasn't even the right guy. He did a fantastic job. So that was the coolest part for me. My favorite song, gosh, they're all good. My favorite song, I think, was Dear Theodosia. That was the best one. Just because the guy's voice, like the guy playing Burr and the guy playing Hamilton, their voices were so perfect together, and that's a very simple duet, and their voices just like it was like a bell, like a those of you who are singers, you know what like that resonance sounds like when tones match perfectly. If you're a singer and you match you have perfect resonance with a tone, your the bones in your skull actually vibrate. It's a vibration that you can feel. And these guys were like they matched so perfectly with the harmonies, and then they perfectly resonated together. And I think that was my favorite one. I actually choked up a little bit during that. Yeah, it was that was I think my favorite just because their voices were so good. Let me see. Oh, I gotta catch up with chat. Navi says, I think they announced lately that you need 18 or up for Node to work. Oh, okay. Weird bug in the updater. I had to manually remove everything, then go into PowerShell and clear the cache. My goodness. Wow. Gotta give the new guys a shot at some point. Yeah, he killed it. Well, and what I liked the most was, I noticed it. I noticed this, and then I was like, wait, am I insane? Like, what is this the guy or is it not? And so I turned to the lady next to me, and I said, is this the guy? And she's like, oh my goodness, it is. That's the guy all the way down at the bottom. I hadn't even noticed. And she said, I guess I don't know, it's one of the favorite things I've ever heard anybody say. She said, um, wow, we are just the luckiest people in the world right now. I said, why? She's like, well, because we might be the only ones to ever see this specific performance, right? Anybody could come in and see, the regular cast doing the same performance night after night, but we might be the only ones to ever get to see this person's specific interpretation of the role on this stage, like ever. He may never get to do it again. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. I love that. Yeah, we are lucky. So I don't know. I just thought that was such a neat take. Renate says the term Hamilton the musical confuses me since Hamilton is also a Swedish action movie from the 90s. Okay, so if you didn't know, in the United States, Alexander Hamilton was one of our founding fathers. So the original guys that helped with the rebellion from the British and signed all the important documents and wrote all the important papers that made the United States a country. Um, so Alexander Hamilton was one of those guys. Um, yeah, but now I'm just imagining like Alexander Hamilton in like a frock coat, being all 80s action movie and firing a machine. Be great. But now I have that mental image, which I appreciate. The resonance works with musical instruments as well. Yeah, and that's the cool thing, right? Is that yeah, resonance is a big reason why things, like guitars and pianos can project sounds. That's why they have those big empty spaces inside of them, because it allows the sounds to resonate inside the box of the instrument. That's why most instruments are like that, or most classic instruments are like that. Is they have a open space inside of them where sound can resonate, where sound can bounce around and make a certain tone. Um, and so our skulls are like that too. So yeah, when you're a singer and you match tone with other singers, or you match in a certain frequency, you can feel that where the sound waves echo off the inside of your skull from your voice, and then from the outside from whatever it is, and it buzzes in your head. It's the neat feeling. Music is fun. Baffin says Hamilton is also kind of a little brother town to Toronto in Ontario. It is either kind of depressing to live in or nice if you're older, and I can't be sure which. It's funny. Yeah, Hamilton is it seems like I had no idea it was like a I wonder what the origin of that name is. I mean it's got to be, European of some kind, because everybody here in the US, we're all from, all the original people they were coming over from Europe somewhere, wherever it was. And so yeah, it's got to be. I wonder if it is Swedish originally. That's interesting. Like what Renate said. I wonder if it's Swedish. I don't know. I love word. I love word origins and like learning where words come from. So that's always kind of interesting to me. I also love random topics at the end of stream. So thank you all for that. Connie says got a Hamilton here in Scotland as well, between Glasgow and Edinburgh. Oh, neat. Okay. So maybe it's wait. Okay, okay, okay. Thinking. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. You're right, Scotty. You nailed it. You nailed it because one of the verses in the musical is there's a word I can't say, and then talking about how Hamilton is the son of a Scotsman. So yes, you are 100% correct. Scottish in this case, Scottish origin. Yes, think of the lyrics in my head. I can't say the word before that, but the but yeah, it's yeah, Scotsman. Yep. So yeah, thank you for helping me connect those dots. I learned history today. Yay! I'm not good at history, so uh, I appreciate that little helping me connect something in the musical to the real world is appreciated. Anything else? Okay. Well, I'm going to kind of start looking for a raid target here, somebody we can spread some love to if we want to. It'll take a hot minute though, so feel free to, converse amongst yourselves or ask any last questions if you want. It takes me a minute to get this pulled up. Also, too, thanks again all for helping me test my new stream layout and my new alerts. I already saw, so I saw at least one alert that's overlapping. I know I need to move my follow alerts to the left. I need to move my chat box down. Also, channel point alerts are working. That's what I was most happy about. Take a flick. Thank you so much for the follow. Yeah, so okay, I need to move my chat box down like that much and move my follows to the left so I can capture everybody's name. And channel point reward alerts are working. I'm using a mixture of Twitch alerts and Streamlabs alerts, which is just a hot mess. So I'm glad that at least some of them are working. And also Prime subscriber alerts are working. Um, I have those doubled up currently, so I'll take off the Twitch alert and leave the Streamlabs one. And yeah, so that was very helpful. No worries, Mattel Geek. I was just talking about the changes I need to make to my layout after this stream. Um, oh, you're secondary on call, Mattel? Oh yeah, I'm on call next week for my job. So yeah, you never know when you're gonna get a phone call. The drawback. But yeah, Engineering War figured it out. They got it handled like a boss. I'm primary next week. Wow. So you have secondary. What is secondary? So secondary on call is if the first person can't be reached. Is that right? How does that work? I don't have. Yeah. What are you trying to trigger there with alert? I don't have an alert command. Right. Okay. In my case, secondary on call is just my manager, and so if I don't answer the phone, then I'm in trouble. Because they don't want to get up at my manager doesn't want to get up at 3 in the morning. So yeah, there's no secondary on call in my role. It's either me or my manager, and they'll handle it. They absolutely will, but I don't want that to happen. Alrighty. We have usually one person on shift on the weekends. Okay. Yeah. All right, we've got some choices today. I dig it. Okay. You're okay, Rex. All right, we've got some choices. So I will just pull them over here so y'all can see them. Um, maybe. Okay. So choices, we've got Acorn 1010. Eduardo, I do think that on the weekends they only do non-English language streams, so it may not be the best choice. I hope you have a great week as well, Happy Pixel. I hope to see you next week, and we'll build something else. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we'll build another project next weekend. We'll see. Team Vash. Uh, I'm partial to Ian Douglas. I believe they raided me a couple weeks ago, so it might be worth giving them a raid back. But as always, if you have any preferences or out of this list or anybody else that you like to recommend, feel free to do so. As long as they are in the software slash game dev space, we kind of like to keep it in the family, as it were, and show folks some love in this smaller category that we all exist in together. But yeah, it was good to have you here, Happy Pixel. All right. Hearing maybe no more JS by then. No, it's all right. Anybody's allowed to watch, even if you don't know, even if you don't know what's going on, we love to have, anybody in chat who wants to hang around and, hang out with us. So, all right, let's go ahead and hit up Ian Douglas. Like I said, I think they rated me a couple streams ago, so we'll hit them back. See what they're up to. If you didn't know, Ian Douglas does see you, Mattel. Ian Douglas does. They are a developer. They also do a lot of giving back to the community. So they do resume advice, career advice, that kind of thing for a career in tech. So you might find it helpful depending on where you're at in your career. All right, let's see what they're up to. Looks like they're just chatting, but we'll see what they're talking about. All right, raid is starting now. I will see you all next weekend. We'll build something fun. This is fun. Good. Happy Sunday. All right, you have a good weekend as well. Raid is starting now. No worries, Layla. Always good to see you. All right, here we go. See you later.